This happened one night like 5 years ago. I had just finished work and it had been a pretty long day. I worked at a restaurant at the time and it was open pretty late, so I didn't get off of work until nearly midnight. After leaving, I began the drive back home, which usually took about 10 minutes. I lived in a quiet town, and the roads back to my house were pretty dark and quiet as well. Mostly there were roads with either farmlands or woods on both sides. As I got closer to my neighborhood, I was driving down a pretty quiet street near a wooded area. I saw a sign on the road that said, "Construction Detour." It was completely blocking where I had to go, and the sign had white and orange stripes. It was basically blocking off the entire street. So I couldn't go the normal way home that I always did. I had no idea why the road was closed or anything like that, but I wasn't using directions to get home or anything because I knew the way. The detour was pointing to the left, so I made the turn, and I figured that it would connect to another street that led to mine. After going down this road, it started to curve, and it was much quieter than the other. It was also heavily surrounded by forest. I drove down this road for maybe a quarter mile. There were a few narrow driveways that I passed by, but then I saw what looked like a dead end. This had to be a mistake. Why would this be a detour if it was a dead-end road? My headlights were the only light at all, and as I got closer to the dead end, I saw something. It was really just woods in all directions, but then I noticed this clown face looking at me, and then there was another and another. When I got closer to the end of the road, I saw about 10 people all wearing these creepy clown masks. They were all standing anywhere from 1 to 10 feet into the woods. It was like a herd of deer all looking at me as I approached. I was instantly creeped out. I slammed on my brakes on the narrow road. I wanted to turn around, and I knew that I needed to turn around, but there was no space on the road to do so. So I turned my car and then hit reverse, and then started going back and forth to slowly turn my car around with the small space that I had. As I was doing this, I saw some of the clowns start to emerge from the woods. A few of them began to walk in my direction. They were maybe 100 feet away from me, and I scrambled to go faster. Soon, the clowns started to jog after me. It was one of the creepiest things I've ever seen. By the time I finally got my car all the way turned around, they were now running at me. I quickly hit the gas, and at least 5 clowns were all sprinting towards my car. I got out of there before they caught up with me, and then went back to the other road. I didn't look back, and then I drove until I found a longer way around the area that led back to my neighborhood. Eventually, I made it back home, and I could not believe what had just happened. I didn't know how to explain it. The next day when I went to work, there was no roadblock or construction or anything. I was able to drive down the road that had been completely closed off, no problem. It makes me think that the signs were put there possibly by those clowns. Was it just a prank to scare people driving by, or was it something worse? What would have happened if those clowns had caught up with me? I don't know, but I'm glad I don't have to find out. It was a Friday night, and my friends and I decided to hang out at the park. We were bored, and the night felt perfect for some fresh air. Around 10 p.m., we heard a car approaching. It was slow, the headlights cutting through the darkness. At first, we didn't think much of it, but then we noticed it was moving towards us. As it got closer, we could see that it was an old beat-up sedan with the windows tinted, so we couldn't see who was inside. Probably just somebody passing through, I said, trying to shrug it off. But as soon as it got closer, the car stopped right in front of us. We looked at each other, unsure of what to do. The engine idled, and the driver's side window rolled down. Staring out the window that had just been rolled down was a clown, complete with a painted face and wild hair. He had a wide grin that looked more unsettling than friendly. "What's up, kids?" he shouted, his voice high-pitched, and he asked us if we needed a ride. We all exchanged nervous glances. Nobody said anything, and we just hoped that he would drive away. There was something off about him, his smile and the way his eyes seemed to be darting around. The clown called out to us again, saying, "Come on, don't be shy." My friend Sarah was the first one to say anything, as she whispered to us that we should leave, her voice shaking. She stood up, and we all followed her lead, backing away from the bench. "Wait, where are you going?" the clown asked, still grinning. "I'm just trying to be friendly," he said. We turned and ran towards the nearest exit of the park. I looked back once, and the clown was still sitting there, his smile now more sinister. We didn't stop running until we reached my house. Out of breath, we piled into the living room, slamming the door behind us. We tried to laugh it off, but the mood had shifted, We were all on edge, checking the windows to make sure that the clown wasn't following us. We eventually relaxed a bit and put on a movie. Hours passed, and at around 1 a.m. after the movie was over, my friends began to leave one by one. After the last one left, I locked the door and turned off the lights. I settled onto the couch, thinking I might finally get some sleep. But then I heard a faint sound outside, an engine slowly driving up the street. I walked quietly to the window and peeked through the blinds. There it was, the same old sedan from earlier, and the window rolled down with that same clown staring straight at my house. His face was illuminated by the dashboard lights, and his grin seemed wider than before. He just sat there, motionless, as if waiting for me to make a move. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. I wanted to call the police, but I didn't want to draw attention to myself or risk being seen. I stayed away from the window, pacing in the dark. The engine continued to run, and I could hear the faint sound of some circus tune music playing. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. I didn't want to look, but curiosity gnawed at me, so I moved back to the window to take a look outside. I could see the clown now tapping his fingers against the steering wheel, still wearing that disturbing grin. Suddenly, he turned his head towards my window, as if sensing I was watching. My heart stopped, and I ducked down quickly, wondering if he had seen me. After what felt like an eternity, I heard the car door slam. I held my breath, waiting for the sound of footsteps. But instead, I heard the engine rev and the car speed off into the night. That image of the car and clown inside scared me for a while, and for the next couple weeks I was paranoid, always checking around me if it was nearby, especially at night. I had a terrifying experience with a clown back when I was in high school. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. It all started one night when I was at work. Back then, I lived with my parents and worked a job at a nearby convenience store. I walked to and from work, and I would ride the bus to school every day. Between work and school, I was pretty busy. So I started work from 3 p.m. until 9 p.m. on this night. Work went by as usual, and when I got off, I left to walk home. The walk would take me about 15 minutes on most days, and I didn't mind it. At my job, I would just be sitting at a counter most of the time, so walking afterwards felt nice. Also, the neighborhood was generally really quiet. I never felt unsafe or had anything scary happen. It did seem a little bit creepy at night sometimes because of how quiet it would be. After leaving work, I started walking along the sidewalk. There were sidewalks for my entire walk home, but I did have to turn a couple of times. About 2 or 3 minutes into the walk, I noticed somebody kind of up ahead. They were standing on the grass between the sidewalk and the street, kind of randomly. It was dark out and they were far away, but when I approached, I soon realized that it was a clown, or at least it was somebody dressed up in a clown costume. It was really creepy looking, and I knew that I would have to walk past him. I didn't really want to, but I did. I tried not to look when I got close, and the clown didn't say anything to me. When I passed it by, I could sense him looking at me though. Still, I didn't look. I just walked past and kept going towards my house. At first, he appeared to stay where he was, but when I got like 20 feet away, I heard him move, and it sounded like he went onto the sidewalk. I got about 50 feet ahead of him, but then I heard him walking behind me. I hoped that he wasn't following me, but I had a bad feeling that he was. When I turned, I looked over and saw that the clown was walking a distance behind me. He turned exactly when I did. There was no question that he was following me. I kept going and tried to walk a little bit faster. I didn't look back, but listened closely in case the clown was going faster as well. He didn't seem to be getting any closer to me though. I crossed another street, which he also did. Now I only had a short distance to go before arriving home. When I got to my street, the clown walked after me. That's when I looked over my shoulder for the first time. He was there, maybe 40 feet back now, and was looking at me. I walked faster, and by now my heart was racing. I was really freaked out. I wanted to start running, but was afraid that the clown would do the same if I did. Instead, I remained as calm as I could and kept walking. Soon I made it to my driveway. I felt a lot better, but still had to make it inside the house. I walked up and got to the front step. It was at that point that the clown reached my driveway. Then I heard him starting to walk up the driveway after me. This made me really nervous, and I scrambled to use my house key to unlock the door. I was panicking, and that was causing me to go slower than usual. I heard the footsteps quickly approaching as I fumbled around with the key. At last, I had unlocked the door. I went inside extremely quick and then slammed the door and locked it behind me. I heard my mom say from the other room, "What was that?" She then called out my name, and I heard the doorknob turn behind me. I ran over to the living room and found my parents. I told them about the clown guy following me home. We went over to the door to look, but he was now gone. I told them the story, and my parents said that they would drive me to and from work for my next shift. We figured that the clown had left, and we were all very creeped out by this situation. Later that night, I went to bed, and the clown didn't come back or anything. But the next morning, I got up to catch the bus for school. It was really early and still dark out because school started at 7:25. So at about 6:50, the bus would usually arrive at my house. And after getting ready for school, I headed out. I left my house at about 6:45 and started walking to the end of my driveway where I would stand and wait for the bus. When I was beginning to walk down the driveway, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I looked and saw the same clown coming around the corner from the side of the garage. I couldn't believe my eyes. I turned and ran back inside the house and called the police right there. Then I found my parents and told them what was going on. We all stayed inside the house until the cops got there. They found the clown hiding in the backyard. I couldn't believe it. I was sure that he had left the previous night. After that, I was able to get a ride with my parents to school because I missed the bus, but I was just grateful to be okay. It still blows my mind that the clown was there in our yard all night. We should have called the police the previous night after he had followed me home. We had just assumed that he left. I guess he camped out on the side of the garage, which was actually a really good hiding place. That guy was a total creep. This remains the scariest moment of my life. I'm now scared of clowns because of it. This story took place on Halloween night 6 years ago. I was a 16-year-old high school kid at the time and lived with my mom and sister. My mom went to take my little sister trick-or-treating and then go to a friend's house, and I decided to stay home alone. I was too old to trick-or-treat, but I also didn't have any plans with friends, so I just stayed home and watched some scary movies. We lived in a neighborhood that wasn't too busy, but I did have a bowl of candy to hand out to people who came. All in all, just 6 people showed up in total, and I ended up eating more of the candy myself than I gave out. I turned off the lights to the house at 9 p.m. so nobody else would stop by. Then I made some popcorn and put on another movie. Then at about 10 p.m., I heard the noise of a car driving by outside. I assumed that it was my mom and sister returning, and I kept watching the TV I had on in the living room. I didn't hear them come inside after about a minute, so I went over to the window and peeked out. What I saw was a small SUV parked in front of our house on the street. It was a little strange because I didn't recognize it to be somebody that lived on our street. Then I saw the doors open and 4 large people who had to be adults get out, except they were all wearing clown masks. They all started to walk up my driveway. When I saw this, my heart started pounding and I immediately got a little scared. I hoped they were just trick-or-treating, but by the size of them, they were not young at all. Then I saw 3 of them go in different directions towards the back of my house, and 1 go to the front door. I quickly ran away and went upstairs to my room. I hid inside, and then heard a knock on the front door. There was no chance I was going to answer it, and I stayed in my room pacing back and forth thinking of what to do. I called my mom, but she didn't answer. Then I heard the sound of glass breaking coming from downstairs. I dialed the police at that point and whispered to them that my house had just been broken into and gave them my address. At the same time as this, I was trying hard to focus on the noises from downstairs, if anybody was going to be coming upstairs or not. I don't know what I was thinking, but I panicked and hung up the phone. I hadn't even listened for how long the police would take to show up. I then heard footsteps starting to come up the stairs, and I became extremely scared. I knew I didn't have any locks on my door, and if they decided to come in my room, they would likely see me. I decided to open up my window and jump out. I felt it was a manageable jump for me, and I didn't want to be in my room if the clown went in, so I opened it up and jumped out. I hurt my feet as I hit the grass, and I tumbled over, but all in all I was just fine. I ran as fast as I could to my neighbors down the street and pounded on their door. They were the neighbors I knew the best, and they let me in right away. I explained to them what was going on, and they let me wait in their house. Eventually the police showed up, and 2 of the 4 men were arrested, with the other 2 being found several hours later. It made for my most scary Halloween. This story took place only about a year ago. I was home by myself at the time as my wife was out shopping. It was roughly 10 p.m., and I was watching some sports center on the living room TV. It was interrupted by the sound of a knock coming from my front door. Based on the time of night, it was strange for this to happen, so I got up and looked out the front window to see who was there before opening the door. I saw there appeared to be a man out there with a clown mask on, standing at my front door. I figured this was some teenage kid trying to be funny and pull a prank on me or something. I walked to the front door and opened it. When I opened the door, though, I saw the guy standing there about 10 feet away from me, staring at me. Now that I had a better view of his face, I could see that the guy was not wearing a clown mask, but had painted his face completely white, had a red nose on, and appeared to be his real hair dyed red, although it was possible it was a wig. The guy was wearing relatively normal clothes, aside from looking like a clown, but he didn't appear to be a teenage kid. Instead, it looked like a full-grown man. He stood there just staring at me. I asked him what he wanted and why he had knocked on my door. He just kept on staring at me. I told the man to get off my property, and I started to close my door. He just kept standing there, though. I turned and went back inside. Then I was sure to lock the door before looking out the front window again to see if the man had gone. When I looked, he wasn't there anymore, and I didn't see him. I was glad he had finally left, and was a little weirded out by the whole situation. But not even a minute later, I heard the sound of glass shattering coming from the back end of my house where the kitchen was. I knew it had to be the clown guy. I moved over to the hallway and went into the bathroom, not knowing how dangerous this guy was. I expected to hear movement from inside the house, but I didn't hear anything at all. I then went back over to where I heard the noise, and saw that a large rock had been thrown through the dining room window, but nobody appeared to be in the house. I wasn't sure if this guy was inside hiding or not, so I went back into my hallway bathroom and locked myself inside, then called the police. I waited there, and didn't hear anything else for the 10 minutes or so until the police arrived. Then I came out of the bathroom and met with the officers, who searched my house up and down, but didn't find anyone. After that, they went out into my backyard and searched the property. To my surprise, they located the man dressed as a clown, hiding deep in the woods in my backyard. He was found with several large rocks in his pockets. I'm not sure if he was planning to come back and throw more rocks at my house, or use them as weapons or what, but I'm glad he ended up being caught.
This happened a few months ago. I was hanging out at my girlfriend's apartment one night, and I ended up staying kind of late. This happened all the time, but it wasn't a big deal because I only lived a few miles away. It was just under a 10-minute drive to get back to my place. By now, as you could imagine, the roads were very quiet, so that's how I noticed that I might be getting followed not long into the drive. I didn't know for sure, but I just remembered that a car was behind me, and when I turned at one road, it did the same thing. I don't remember exactly when it started to follow me, and after the first turn, I thought nothing of it. The way back to my apartment, though, was not a straight shot, and I had to turn a few times. For the next 3 turns, the car did the same as me. I just found this odd, and we were basically the only 2 cars on the entire road. The closer we got, the more I wondered if I was being followed. Of course, with it being late at night, I was probably just feeling slightly paranoid. I didn't actually seriously believe that I was being followed, but I was curious. Then I came to a stoplight. There was a red upcoming at an intersection. To that point, I had not been able to see who was behind the wheel of the car behind me because it was too dark. When I got to the intersection, there was a bit more light there. I looked back in my mirror and I saw who was driving. The guy looked like a clown. His face was painted and his hair appeared dyed red. He also had a red nose on. It wasn't a funny clown though, it just looked creepy. This was a bit unsettling because it was nowhere near Halloween time or anything. I didn't know why some guy would be out driving late at night looking like a clown. When the light turned green, I kept going with the clown still following me. We made another turn and I was a little bit more nervous. Soon we were approaching my apartment complex. It is several buildings with a large parking lot sort of in the middle. As I pulled into the lot, the clown did too. That's when I realized that I could not just park and try to go inside, so I kept going through the parking lot and then turned out at the next area. When I did this, the clown did not turn out of the parking lot, but kept going farther into it. I let out a sigh of relief. I got back onto the road, and I guessed that it was just a big coincidence, and for some reason somebody who lived at my apartment complex was dressed as a clown. They also happened to drive home right behind me the entire way. It was weird, but I figured I'd drive down a ways, come back, and then go inside. So I went to the end of that quiet street, then made a U-turn and headed back to the apartment complex. I made it back about 2 or 3 minutes after the clown would have arrived. I parked my car on the opposite end of the lot to where I had seen the clown going. He was nowhere in sight now, but there were a lot of cars there. After getting out of my car, I began walking for my apartment building. But that's when I saw the guy again. The clown was now walking on a sidewalk near the front of one of the buildings. When I saw him, I started to walk faster to get to my building. But when the clown saw me, it was like he was after me right away. He changed directions and was now headed for where I was. We were still a long distance away from each other though. I hightailed it for the side door of my apartment building. As soon as I started moving, I saw the clown start to run after me. This caused me to run as well. I went as fast as I could, and thankfully I was able to reach the door. I quickly went inside and made sure that the door shut behind me. Then I ran up the stairs to my floor. I didn't hear the door opening behind me, so I'm assuming that the clown did not get in. Then I went to my apartment and was finally home. I didn't get any knocks on my door or have anything strange happen, and since then I haven't seen that crazy clown. I wonder who it was though, and why the guy followed me. Did he know who I was, or was I just a random target? Obviously, I wouldn't probably recognize the guy if I saw him, unless of course he was dressed as a clown again. I'm hoping that nothing like that happens again.
So this story took place just a few weeks ago. It's really bizarre and also scary. I play in a fantasy football league with a bunch of my friends. If anybody doesn't know, in fantasy football, you draft players that are in the NFL, and based on their performances for the week, your team gets points. Your team plays another team every week. There's playoffs and a championship game at the end. Well, in the league that I play with my friends, whoever gets last place in the league has to get punished. Before the season starts, people think of ideas for punishments and we vote on it and decide it. So everybody knew that this year, our punishment was to dress up as a clown. Then the loser would have to walk down one of the busiest streets in our nearby city. Thankfully, I didn't lose, but one of my best friends, Ben, did. My friend Jordan and I decided to go with him for his punishment. We were going to record it and send it to everybody else in the league. We first went to a party supply store and bought a cheap clown mask and costume. Then we wrote on a piece of cardboard, "I suck at fantasy football." We then drove to the city, which was about 15 minutes away. It's a pretty large city and also very busy. When we got there, the sun was setting, but there was still a lot of people out. Ben reluctantly put on his loser clown outfit, and we were laughing like crazy. We parked in this little parking lot on the edge of downtown, and then walked several blocks. When we got into the heart of the city, Ben had to walk the entire way down the street and back. He kept trying to negotiate and make it a shorter walk, but it was our responsibility to make sure that the punishment was fulfilled. Ben walked on the sidewalk and people were staring at him. We laughed and got our pictures and videos. Then we started to head back. When we did though, we noticed that there was another person dressed as a clown. It was really strange to see. I mean, there were a lot of people around, but I didn't expect to see someone else who looked like a clown. Obviously, we had to have Ben go over and say hi to the other clown. We walked over, and when we got over to him, saw that his mask and costume was a lot better than Ben's. He didn't really seem amused though. The other clown just kind of stood there. Ben attempted a handshake with the other clown, but he left him hanging. He wasn't saying anything either, so we just left. We started walking back to our car. which would take probably less than 5 minutes or so. We walked along the sidewalk away from where most of the people were. It was a much quieter area where we parked. About a minute into the walk, Jordan said that the clown appeared to be following us. I looked back and saw him walking behind us, but a long ways away. We all found this funny and figured that the guy was just joking around. We kept walking, and surprisingly, the clown remained behind us. Eventually, we crossed the street and had to go just another block to get to the car. When we crossed the street, it was much quieter, and hardly anybody else was around. The clown then crossed the street as well. He appeared to be getting closer. I found it a little bit strange that he was still behind us. Soon we made it to the parking lot, and at that point, saw the clown had started to run after us. We all hurried to get inside of the car. We were laughing, but I honestly found it a little bit creepy. I have a smaller SUV, and I was driving, with Jordan in the passenger seat and Ben in the back. I started the car and then watched and laughed as the clown kept running after us. When the clown reached the parking lot, he stopped. I started driving out, and we would have to go right past him. He was now standing by the exit. When I was starting to drive by the clown, he turned and faced us. Then I saw him pulling something out of his pocket. I didn't know what it was because I looked away to focus on the road. But the next thing I knew, I heard a loud noise come from the back of the car and a crashing of glass. Then I heard Ben say that the clown threw a brick at us. I drove out of there, and the back window was half smashed. Everybody in the car was fine, and Ben didn't get any glass on him or anything. We called the police though and reported the clown, and were glad to get away from him. I thought he was harmless. It was creepy that he followed us, but we had no idea that he would pull a brick out and throw it at us. The whole situation is so crazy, I wouldn't believe it if I wasn't there myself. It made for the most memorable fantasy football punishment ever.
This story takes place in the fall of 2016, right in the heat of the whole killer clown thing that was going on for a while. My cousin and I were both in middle school at the time, and I was staying over at his house one night. There were quite a few people in the house that night, including us, my aunt and uncle, and my younger cousins. It will be easier to understand the story by explaining the layout of the house and yard first. They lived in a rather large double-wide trailer that they bought that was positioned on a flattened part of a hill. Their driveway is a rather steep gravel slope that connected to the road at the bottom of the hill. Behind the house and up the hill was nothing but woods. My cousin and I were the only ones still awake this night, watching TV in the living room. We kept hearing noises in the woods behind the house. We could see into the woods from the window in the living room where we were sitting, but we didn't pay much attention to the noises since it was kind of windy. Plus, my uncle had lots of motion lights outside the house. The motion lights were positioned in the back facing the woods, the side door close to the driveway on the opposite side of the house, and on the porch that overlooked the front yard and the road. Because of all the motion lights, we weren't too worried about anyone or anything being outside, since anything out there would trigger the lights. We had heard lots of stories and watched lots of YouTube videos about the whole killer clown thing that was popular at the time. Personally, I didn't think that it was real. I thought it was just prank videos. Also, we live in a small town in northeast Tennessee where everyone owned some sort of firearm, including my uncle. We were never afraid of anyone dressing up as a clown and trying anything. The only lights on in the house were the TV and the dim light up above the kitchen sink that was only a few feet behind the couch. Suddenly, the motion detector light in the backyard turned on. We noticed, but we didn't think anything of it. The lights were set on a 10-minute timer, and if it detected movement, it would stay on and turn off after 10 minutes if no other movement was detected. After 10 minutes, they went back off, so we figured that it was just an animal, which wasn't uncommon. After about 20 minutes, I went to the bathroom down the hall. I did my business and washed my hands. But when I came out of the bathroom, the motion light on the side of the house by the side door that entered into the laundry room turned on. I could see it shining through the thin blinds that were on the door. I heard what sounded like footsteps on the gravel outside, and then the doorknob started rattling quickly like somebody was trying to open it. Luckily, the blinds were shut, so whoever it was didn't see me. I ran back into the living room to tell my cousin. My cousin had heard the same thing I did,
because he was already up and halfway into his dad's room to wake him up. At that point, I saw the light from the front porch come on, so I got up to look out the window that looked out to the porch, but I couldn't see anything. My uncle had quickly grabbed his pistol and a flashlight and was out on the front porch looking for whoever or whatever it was. My cousin and I were behind him on the porch watching. He looked around with the flashlight for a bit, and eventually we saw something. There at the bottom of the hill in the ditch by the road was someone dressed up as a clown in a cheap-looking costume. The clown was facing up the hill towards us, and it just looked at us and waved. My uncle fired a warning shot, and the clown ran across the road and into the woods. My cousin and I didn't sleep anymore that night, while my uncle stayed out on the porch for a few more hours to make sure that nobody came back. I don't doubt that it could have just been a high school kid playing a prank trying to scare whoever was in the house. After reading some more experiences with these clowns of people's lives actually being threatened and in danger, it still scares me to think of what the clown would have tried to do if he was able to get inside the house. This story happened years ago when I was a kid. I think I was about 10 years old or so. I remember that my parents took me to this really big park that was sort of near our house. We lived kind of by the city, so the parks were always really crowded. It was a weekend, so the park was especially busy. I think there was some kind of event going on, because there was people everywhere. I remember noticing a clown almost immediately, and the clown waving at me. I was kind of creeped out by clowns, so I sort of waved and then walked away. Me and my parents walked towards another area of the park, where there was a bunch of stuff going on, such as games and even a live band in one area. We played a few games and walked around. There was some food and things like that. It was overall a fun time, and eventually we left to go to the grocery store. After we were done shopping, we were walking back to our car when I noticed there was a van parked a few spaces away from us. And just for a second, I looked over and thought I saw the clown in the driver's seat duck down. It was a little odd to see a clown driving a van. But like I said before, I wasn't much of a fan of clowns, so I just put it out of my head, and me and my parents went home. Later that night at home after dinner, I went outside to play around with my basketball hoop in the driveway like I often did. But when I got outside, I saw a van across the street parked on the side of the road, and once again the clown was driving. He ducked down again when I saw him, but this time he raised his head back up slowly and smiled at me. Then he began to wave. I ran back inside the house as fast as I could and told my parents, but by the time they made it outside, we all saw the van driving away down the street. He never did come back after that, thankfully, but I get creeped out thinking back on that every time. I'm going to tell you a very strange experience I had that happened just last year. I worked at a grocery store then that was pretty close to my house. One night, I got off of work at 10 p.m., and on my way out of the store, I picked up some chicken and potato wedges that they had in the deli area. It was one of my favorite things to get at work when I got food there. It had been a long day of work, and I was starving, so hungry that I could hardly wait to eat. After I got the food and left the store, I walked through the now quiet parking lot to my car. I was parked at the far back of the parking lot, which is where I usually was. I got to my car, went inside, and began eating the chicken. It always tasted so good after work when I would be super hungry. I was just chowing down without a care in the world, and also on my phone, when out of nowhere I was interrupted by a knock coming from my passenger side window. I looked over and just about dropped everything when I saw a creepy-looking clown looking right inside my window. It was probably the last thing I was expecting to see. I was quite creeped out by this. There was no chance I was going to lower the window or open the door. The clown just kept looking directly at me the entire time, staring. I noticed that the clown was holding several balloons in his hand. Whoever this was went to great lengths with the clown costume. If it was Halloween night or the middle of the day, I might have been entertained by this, but it was nowhere near Halloween, and it was after 10 o'clock at night. The clown had moved his head closer and closer, and his face was now pressed all the way up against my passenger side window. Then he tried the door handle. Of course, it was locked, but after failing to get inside, he then banged on the window. I wasn't staying there any longer, and I put my car into reverse and backed up, then sped out of there. The clown watched me the entire time as I did. I just wanted to get away from him, and I didn't notice until I got home that he had tied a balloon on a string around my passenger side door handle. After I got out of my car, I removed it. I popped the balloon and was going to throw it away, but I then noticed something inside the now deflated balloon. I took it out to see it was like a folded up piece of paper. After unfolding it, I was shocked. It was a printed photo, and it looked like it was taken with the flash on at nighttime, and the picture was of my house. I have no clue who that guy dressed as a clown was, or why he did this to me. I didn't notice anything strange happening or anything like that. Nothing like this has happened since, either.
This happened when I was a freshman in high school. During this time, I lived at home with my parents and older sister. We lived in what I would describe as a pretty average neighborhood. Our backyard was sort of big, but overall it was a very populated area. So one night, I was at home playing video games in my bedroom. My sister was in her room and my parents were out in the living room. I always liked to play video games in my room, and I had a really good setup in there. I had my gaming chair, big monitor, and a TV as well. I remember that after gaming for a long time, I got to a loading screen. I leaned back in my chair to stretch, and I casually looked to my right out of my bedroom window. The window looked out to the backyard, and at the back of the yard was a small woods. Something caught my eye when I looked out there. It looked sort of like there was a clown looking at me from just inside the woods. At first, I thought surely that wasn't the case. I kept looking and was squinting my eyes to see better. It sure looked like there was a clown there. So I got up from my chair and walked over to the window. Now that I had a better view, I could see that there was in fact a clown there, or at least somebody that was wearing a clown mask. They were standing just a couple of feet into the woods, partially blocked by trees. But the clown was looking right at our house, possibly at my window. It was extremely creepy to see this. I ran out of my bedroom and found my parents in the living room. I told them there was some guy dressed as a clown in the backyard. They followed me to my bedroom window, but when we got there, whoever this guy was now gone. I told my parents where he was and everything. We all went outside after that and looked around the backyard, although I was really creeped out. Luckily, we didn't see or hear anything when we were out there. The woods in our backyard was not that big. It only went back probably 20 feet, and then there was a fence. I was guessing whoever this guy was went through the neighbor's yard. At least he wasn't in our yard anymore. It was a real mystery as to who he was and what exactly he was doing back there. We all went back inside, and I went back to what I was doing. I looked out of my window every so often, but luckily the clown man did not return. The next couple of days were normal, no signs of the clown or anything. But it was less than a week later, and I found myself home alone. My parents were gone at friends, and my sister was at a friend's house also. I was playing video games in my bedroom, and it was probably about 9 o'clock at night. It was the same setup as the previous time. I randomly looked out of my window, which was to my right, about 15 feet away. I saw the clown guy again. This time, he was not in the woods though, but standing in the middle of the backyard, much closer. He was facing me and looking directly at my window. I got up and ran over to the window and covered it with my shades. I then ran out of my bedroom as quickly as possible. I didn't know what to do. Why would the clown guy come back? I called my parents and told them about it. They advised me to call the police if he didn't leave the yard immediately. So I looked out of another window, but I didn't see the guy anymore. I was hoping that meant that he left. I got off the phone with my parents and then looked out of several other windows. I didn't see the clown. Then I headed back to my bedroom. When I was walking in though, I heard a knock at the front door. I went over and checked out the front window and saw the clown. He was standing on the front step. I just moved away from there and ignored it. I went back into my bedroom, put my headphones on, and forced myself to just play video games. I did that until my parents got back home. When they did, the clown guy was long gone. After that night, I kept my bedroom window covered at all times. I also didn't stay home by myself for several weeks because I was too creeped out to. I'm not sure if the clown guy ever came back or not, but I didn't see him or hear from him again.
I had an interaction with a clown once that stuck with me for a while. I live in a small village in England. On one side of our village is a vast forest that has parts that are very thick with trees and some parts that are large clearings. I usually walked there on weekends as it was relaxing and a calming place for me. However, I don't walk anywhere near there after what happened. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was doing my usual route through the woods when I came across many pieces of paper on the ground, all scattered in a specific area. There wasn't a breeze that day, so the pieces of paper hadn't blown off. There must have been about 50 pieces of paper, all with the same phrase on them. All the papers said, "Bringing you the laugh." I didn't really think much of it, and I took a photo of it to show my friends later. I kept on walking, and 5 minutes later I came across another pile, all with the same phrase, "Bringing you the laugh," written on them. I took another picture and decided I would report it to the non-emergency number when I got home. When I looked up from taking the picture, I saw a bright flash of color in the tree line. I called out, "Hello," and "Who's there?" but I heard nothing. I thought I was seeing things, but I was cautious as I kept walking. Then, suddenly, a clown jumped out from behind a tree. He had a latex mask that covered his head and was wearing a bright yellow, purple, and red costume covered in polka dots. His mouth was revealed through a mask, and he grinned at me. I was expecting him to have crooked yellow teeth, and I was surprised when he flashed perfect, bright white ones at me. I was shocked and started out, "Who are you?" He giggled and said in a sing-song voice, "I'm Honky the Clown. I'm your best friend." He kept asking me questions about where I lived, what my name was, and if I locked my doors at night. I was annoyed and creeped out, so I told the clown firmly that it wasn't funny and to leave me alone. His demeanor changed quickly. He stopped grinning and in an upset voice repeated the words, "Not funny?" over and over again. He kept repeating those words, but he got angrier every time he said it. After the 5th repetition of the words, he was practically spitting with fuming anger. He then took a kitchen knife out of his back pocket and lunged at me. I dodged out of the way, but not quite fast enough apparently. I sprinted out of there as fast as I could possibly run. I hadn't felt him cut me, but I looked at my arm while running and saw a long thin line appear on my skin, oozing blood. I was able to get away without the clown following me, and nothing happened after that. I ran out of the woods, back home, and I called the police instantly. When the police arrived, I took them to the place where the clown was, but he was gone, and so was the paper. The police investigated for a few days, asked a few questions, but were gone by Wednesday. I haven't seen the clown since, but I still look over my shoulder sometimes, as if there was a clown there, watching me, holding a knife. This story took place about 5 months ago. I live in a house sort of out in the country. There's not a lot of people that live in my neighborhood, and the houses are spaced apart a little bit. I like it because I'm into wildlife, and I have a decent-sized woods on my property. One night, at about 10 p.m., I was stepping out into my deck to get something, and I heard some noises coming from just inside the woods. I see deer a lot, but these noises sounded like something bigger. Still, I assumed it was probably just a deer, but I thought that it might be a bear. I stepped out farther onto my deck and looked out to the entrance of the woods that was about 50 feet away. It was dark out, and I only had a little light from my deck, so I couldn't really see anything. The noises pretty much stopped, and after about 2 or 3 minutes, I went back inside. The next day, I walked out into my backyard and into the woods to see the area where I had heard the noises the night before. I got a little ways into the woods when I saw a clown mask on the ground. It was one of the more creepy-looking clown masks that I have seen. I wasn't quite sure what to make of it, but I figured some teenager had wandered into my woods or something. It just seemed strange to me because my woods is very large, and I know my neighbors well, and the ones with kids aren't the type to do this sort of thing that I was aware of. I picked up the clown mask and brought it back to show my wife. We ended up having a laugh about it. But that same night, I was watching TV at sometime around 11 o'clock, when I started to hear some noises once again coming from my backyard. But it wasn't trees and leaves being moved around like it was the night before. It was the noise of screams. It sounded like a bunch of people, all just screaming and yelling. I couldn't make out any words in all the noise, but it sounded like it was coming from just inside my woods once again. I went out to my deck again and turned on the lights. The screams continued for about 10 seconds until I yelled into the woods asking who was there. Then they all stopped. Everything became silent. I expected to hear some noise from them, but I just heard nothing at all. Then I got a call on my phone from my neighbor asking what the noises were coming from my backyard at this hour. I told him I didn't know what was going on. I then went back inside, but kept a close eye out on my backyard. There were no more noises that night, and the next day I once again went back out to the woods, and this time got a little bit farther in, before seeing at least 10 clown masks on the ground, all laid out in a circle. They were all very creepy looking masks, and it gave me the chills. I haven't had any more incidences like this since then, and I don't know what was going on with the clown masks, if they were kids trying to prank me or something else. Either way, it was pretty creepy.
This happened when I was much younger, and it was back way before the clown trends of like 2016 where everybody was dressing up as clowns. I was about 10 years old, and I lived with my parents and my older sister. One night, though, I found myself home alone. I can't remember exactly where my sister was, but my parents were at family's, but it was something where I would have been really bored. I didn't stay at home by myself too often. Our house and neighborhood was pretty normal for the most part. We had a small-sized front yard as well as backyard. The neighborhood street was generally pretty quiet, but we had a good amount of neighbors. After my parents left, I probably just watched TV in the living room and hung out. I don't remember exactly what I did. A few hours in, though, at maybe 9 p.m., I remember that I heard this noise. I couldn't quite tell what it was, but it sounded like it was coming from the front door area. Like maybe it was somebody knocking on the door but quietly, or maybe they were trying to unlock the door or open it. I couldn't quite make out what exactly the sound was, but for a moment I thought that maybe my parents were home already. After not hearing anything for the next few seconds, I decided to get up and look. I walked over towards the front door. As soon as I was walking past it, though, I saw a clown standing there. I noticed through the little window on the front door. There was a guy wearing a clown mask just standing there, literally staring right into the door. I was not expecting to see it at all. I jumped back and then ran all the way upstairs. Then I found a phone and I called my parents. However, they did not answer at the time. I was really scared from seeing the clown man. I didn't hear any more noises or anything, so I went over to an upstairs window where I could look outside near the front door. When I did, I saw that the clown man was now gone. This made me feel a little bit better. I didn't know why he had been there in the first place, but it seemed as though he was gone now. So I went back downstairs and then looked around out the front window. I still didn't see the clown anywhere, so I returned to the living room couch and resumed watching TV. Sometime later, maybe like 30 minutes, I got up to go into the kitchen. When I was doing this, I passed by a back window, and that's when I saw him again. The guy dressed as a clown was standing right on the other side of one of the windows and looking into the house. As soon as I saw him, I immediately turned and ran away. This time I ran upstairs and went all the way to my bedroom. I was really scared and did not want to leave my room at all. However, not long after this, as I was hiding under my blankets, there was a call on the phone. I left my bedroom and went out into the hallway and answered it. It was my parents calling back. I told them what was going on, and they said that they were on the way home now. I went back into my room and hid there for the rest of the time until my parents returned. When they did, the clown was gone. My dad searched the entire property, but the clown was nowhere to be seen. I was glad that he was gone, and I'm not sure why he was there in the first place. Maybe it was just somebody trying to be funny. But going into the backyard and looking through a window is a little too far for a prank if you ask me. After that night, I didn't want to stay at home alone for a long time. I live in a small, quiet city. My girlfriend and I were 18 and 19 when this happened a few years back. We used to walk alone at night all the time,
either from my house to hers or the other way around. It always felt safe. You'd hardly see anybody on the streets after a certain hour, which we liked. One evening, just as it was starting to get dark, we decided to walk to her place from mine. We were joking and talking about random stuff. At some point, she suggested that we take a different route just for fun, since we always walked the same way, and I agreed. We kept going for about 15 minutes or so when we realized we didn't really recognize the area. I remember saying, "Wait, this isn't the way home, is it?" And we must have just taken a wrong turn somewhere. Right then, we heard a loud whistle, a clear one, how somebody whistles when they're trying to get your attention. We turned around and we saw a clown. His clothes were kind of torn. In one hand, he held 3 balloons, and in the other, a big butcher knife. At first, we honestly thought it was a prank or somebody filming a video. We had never seen anything like that in real life. It just felt like out of a movie. I didn't know what to do, so I just said, "Hello, how are you?" I was half laughing, but he didn't answer. Instead, he started whistling a children's song and began slowly walking towards us. That was when we panicked and ran. The thing is, no matter how far we ran or how many turns we took, somehow we'd see him again, either around a corner or across the street. Whenever we turned to look, he would always be walking, like he didn't want us to see him running or something. We didn't see anybody else. The streets were dead. It was getting darker and the streetlights hadn't come on yet. After running for a while, we found a spot behind some trees and just hid. I think we stayed there for at least half an hour. We didn't hear anything. No footsteps, no whistling, just silence. Eventually, we decided to try to find our way back. We were way off than where we thought we were. It took us a bit, but we figured it out. We calmed down a little, though we were still kind of looking over our shoulders. Then, just once more, we saw the clown. He was standing on the sidewalk, back turned to us this time, still holding the balloons and the knife. He didn't see us, and we kept walking until we were back at my girlfriend's house. Later, we figured it had to be a prank, some guy trying to scare people. But about a week later, we saw something on the local news. Someone had been attacked by a man dressed as a clown not far from the area we saw him. They weren't seriously hurt, but the police hadn't caught the guy either. After that, we stuck to our usual route, and we did not see or hear the clown again in our town. Something really crazy happened a few months ago. I live alone in an apartment building. I have my own place and have lived here for a couple years. One night I was at home and got a random FaceTime call on my cell phone. I do not use FaceTime all that much, maybe here and there with a few close friends or family, but not very often. So when I looked, I saw that it was a number I did not recognize, so it wasn't somebody that I had in my phone yet. I really couldn't think of who it could be, and I figured that it was maybe a wrong number, but I was curious, and so for some reason I answered it. When I did, right away the first thing I saw was someone wearing a full clown mask completely covering their head. It covered their neck too, and had colored hair as well. It almost made me drop my phone because it was really creepy and I just wasn't expecting it. The clown person did not say anything. It looked like a man, but I really had no idea who this was. After a few seconds of us just looking at each other, I finally said, "Hi, who are you?" The clown said nothing, but just stared at me. He moved around a little bit like he was walking as he was on FaceTime with me. It appeared as though he was in a dark room. I asked once again, this time speaking louder. He still didn't answer, but then a few seconds later, he just hung up. It was a really weird thing, and I didn't know why this clown called me on FaceTime or how he even got my number, and then why would he randomly hang up on me? I thought about calling back, but decided not to. I just hoped that he would not FaceTime me again. Less than a minute later, though, I got a text message. It was from the same number. I looked at it to see that it was just a photo, which was a selfie taken by the clown. This was creeping me out, and I wanted to know who this was. I texted back asking just that, and asked why they were texting me. However, the clown did not respond. This annoyed me, and before I went to bed that night a couple of hours later, I blocked the number. The following day, I had not received any texts or calls. I got back home from work pretty late, I remember. It was like 9 o'clock at night. So by now, things around the apartment complex were very quiet, with not many people out, if any. I had a parking space in the apartment parking garage which was underneath the building, and then my apartment was on the second floor of the building out of 3. I left my car, walked through the quiet garage to the elevator that was down there, and then I pushed the button to the elevator and waited. As I was standing there, I heard footsteps a long ways back and kind of around the corner. It was a little weird because I didn't hear any doors opening or closing, either to a car or to one of the doors down there, so I didn't know where this person was coming from.
but I didn't look back to see where they were, as they were still a really long ways away. After a few more seconds, the elevator door opened. I walked inside and now turned around to push the button for my floor. As the doors were open there, the person who I had heard walking was now within view. If they were walking my way, I was possibly going to hold the door open for them. However, as soon as I looked, I saw that it was a man wearing a clown mask, the same one who I had seen on FaceTime and text. It was the same guy. He was now at my apartment building, and he was walking towards me, moving really fast. I pushed the button a bunch of times, hoping that the door would close faster. It felt like the door delayed itself, but shortly after I pushed the button, it did start to close. The clown then began jogging, and as the door started to shut, he started sprinting. It was a tense few moments, but thankfully he did not reach me. The door closed when he was still about 10 feet away. As the elevator started to move up, I heard him hitting the door. I figured that he was going to now try to take the stairs, and I got myself ready to run. As soon as the door opened on the second floor, I sprinted out of the elevator and down the hallway to my apartment. However, when I did, I didn't hear anything at all. I wasn't sure if this was because the clown had not arrived at my floor yet, or if he possibly didn't know where I lived, or if he was even chasing me at all still. But either way, I hurried and unlocked my door and then went inside. Then I locked the door behind me and began looking out of the peephole. For the first minute or two, I saw nothing. The apartment was now completely quiet. I thought that maybe the clown had given up, so I started walking away. But then I heard a door close off in the distance. It sounded like the door to the stairwell. So then, at that point, I went back over to the peephole and looked out of it. Within about 30 seconds, I heard footsteps approaching. Then I saw the same clown walking by. He thankfully did not stop at my door or anything. He just slowly walked by and looked around. He did look at my door, but then just kept going. I was sure not to make a sound. Then, after he was gone, I felt more relaxed. I realized that I don't think he knew where I lived, but I still think that he was looking for me. I was still concerned about the whole thing. I thought that I might get another text or something, but I did not. Since then, I haven't seen the clown or heard from him. But if I ever see him again, I'm calling the cops. I'm wondering if he's somebody who lives in the apartment building or just a random guy. Sometimes I wonder if he was stalking me or something like that. I still don't know how he got my number or knew what apartment building I lived in. Also, how did he just happen to be in the parking garage when I arrived home at 9 o'clock p.m.? Was he hiding in there? Because I didn't hear any doors opening. And because of the fact that he was disguising himself, he could be somebody that I've seen before, whether it was someone in my apartment complex, someone at work, the gym, or maybe a store I go to frequently. It's a creepy thought to think about, but I'm just glad that I haven't seen the clown since and nothing else strange has happened. I'm hoping it stays that way.
This story took place 2 summers ago. I was walking my dog Albert one night after work. It was something that I did almost every day. Usually I would walk Albert earlier, but I had been working late that day, so I went out just as the sun was setting at about 8:30 p.m. or so. I would walk around the neighborhood and into some other neighborhoods that were close by. It was a pretty nice area with a lot of houses, and normally I'd see a few other people out walking dogs and such, but at this time, it was pretty empty. I went about 30 minutes out, but before turning back, I let Albert run around in the grass a little. As I did, I noticed something off in the distance. It was someone wearing a clown costume. The costume was really well done. He was wearing a whole clown outfit, and instead of a mask, appeared to have his whole face painted, and was also wearing a wig. It seemed really weird to me immediately, because it wasn't Halloween, and he didn't appear to be with anyone. He just seemed to kind of be walking up and down the street. Unfortunately for me, I had to walk past him to get home. I waited there at the park for a few minutes to see if he would walk away first, but then Albert seemed to notice him and let out a few barks. Albert is a French bulldog, so he's pretty small and not very intimidating, but he still likes to bark at people a lot. As he did, I saw the clown stop walking and turn his head over to look at us. He then turned his head back and walked away. Once he was gone, I headed back with Albert. I didn't notice the clown at all anymore until about 10 minutes later. I heard the sound of someone walking behind me, not very close, maybe about 100 feet back or so. Immediately, I got a bad feeling that it was the clown. I didn't want to stop and look behind me, so I just kept walking until I got to the next street corner, and when I did, I casually looked behind me to see that it was in fact the clown that was walking behind me. I continued to walk home with the clown tailing a far ways back. The longer he followed me and the closer I got to home, the more nervous I became. For a few minutes, I didn't hear the clown at all, so I turned around and was relieved to not see anyone. But just a few minutes later, I heard the footsteps once again. Then, out of nowhere, I heard the sound of the footsteps change to the sound of someone running. I looked behind me and saw the clown running directly at me and Albert with a huge, creepy grin on his face. At that point, I knew nothing else but to start running myself. I sprinted as fast as I could. Luckily, I'm in pretty good shape, and so is Albert. Even though his legs are pretty short, he was able to keep up with me as I sprinted down the street. I took a turn at the next block, and even though it wasn't the way home, I was trying to lose the clown. Then when I was at the end of that street, I turned again. At last, I stopped hearing the clown and looked behind me to see that he was finally gone. I walked a few more blocks and then went back to the way home. I was checking my surroundings constantly the entire way back. I was so glad to make it back safely without the clown following us, and decided I would try to avoid walking Albert at night from then on. I went to bed that night and slept great. But when I woke up the next morning, I opened the blinds to my bedroom window and noticed something. On my bedroom window, there was a balloon with the string taped to it. I got the chills when I saw it. The creepiest part is that I had slept with my windows cracked open all night, something that I often did during the summertime to get some fresh air in the house. I figured it had to be the clown that left the balloon, and it creeps me out thinking he was outside my window that night. But who he was or what he wanted, I still don't know.
I live by myself, and my house is out in the country a little bit. I haven't lived here for that long, about 2 years now. The backyard to my house is very large, and there's a big woods taking up most of it. One night, when I was at home by myself, the weather was very nice. I opened up a back window to get a bit of a breeze in the room that I was in and to cool it down. Sometime later on in the night, with the window being open, I heard a noise coming from what sounded like the edge of the woods. I walked over and then looked outside, thinking maybe another deer was in my yard. What I saw instead shocked me. I saw a man, fully dressed as a clown from head to toe, sprinting through the woods. He briefly came out of the woods just in front of the trees before darting back in. The guy was running extremely fast, like a full sprint. He never looked over at me or my house, and I could see the long green hair from the clown mask blowing in the wind. After making it past me, he continued through the woods, now way out of my sight. I was left in shock at what I had just seen. It was probably a total of like 3 seconds that I saw the guy because he was running so fast. I was wondering why, but I was also wondering where did he come from and where was he going? I didn't have any prankster neighbors that I was aware of or anything. I kept watching out the window for a good amount of time, but I never saw the clown come back and I didn't hear anything either. Maybe an hour or so later, I was still curious about it, so I decided to go outside. I walked out my back door and stepped into the yard. There was an open space of grass and my patio back there before it was pretty much surrounded by woods. When I got outside, it was very calm and quiet. I only heard the sound of the leaves blowing in the wind. I walked around the backyard and even took a few steps into the woods. I didn't hear or see anything strange at all. Apparently, it seemed as though the clown had just run through the woods in my yard and that was it. He hadn't left anything or done anything. I kept walking around my yard and I soon got to the side of my house. From there, I can sort of see my next door neighbor's house, even though it's a good distance away. I just remember that I looked over and I saw something in the window. On the second floor, I noticed the clown. He was inside of the house and looking at me. It gave me the creeps to see. I was pretty sure that an older woman lived in that house and I wasn't aware of anybody else who lived there. But I didn't think that it was her who ran through my yard or was pretending to be a clown. I had met her once, but I didn't really know her. I figured she maybe had somebody over, maybe a kid or grandkid who was messing with me. After that, I went back inside of my house. For the next few days, nothing strange happened, and I sort of forgot about the clown. But then, I happened to be outside in the front door, and I saw my next door neighbor was out as well. I remembered what had happened, and I decided to talk to her. I walked over, and I asked her if anybody else lived with her or was staying with her several days before. She said no. I told her about what happened with the clown and stuff. She told me that she had no idea what that would have been, because she was sure that nobody was in her house, and she also told me that she had been gone that night. When I heard this, it sort of freaked me out. I really didn't know how to explain it, and I still don't.
Since then, I haven't seen the clown or anything. My neighbor still lives there by herself, and she hasn't found any clowns or guys living there too. I'm not sure if that clown guy broke into her house that night or what. Either way, it was very strange. Back when I was in high school, I lived at home with my parents and siblings. However, one night, my brother and my sister were over at their friends' houses. I had friends too, but I wasn't hanging out with them on this night. My parents went out with their friends as well, so I was all alone at home for the occasion. I was a freshman at the time and was too young to drive, unlike my two older siblings. I had stayed at home alone several times before, and I enjoyed it. It was nice to have the entire house to myself for a change, and usually I would just play video games though. So on this night, I remember that's what I was doing. I was up in my bedroom and playing on my PlayStation. My bedroom, along with everybody else's, was on the second floor of the house. The way my room was situated was that it was at the back side of the house and had a window that overlooked our backyard. In my room, the bed was against the wall, and then across from it was my desk and my TV. Then in the corner was my closet, which was next to the window. So I was in there just gaming, and at one point, probably around 9 p.m., I'd been doing that for hours. I would randomly glance outside every now and then for no particular reason. One time when I looked outside, I saw something. I rolled my gaming chair over a little ways to see what was in the yard. When I did, I realized that there was somebody just standing in the middle of our backyard wearing this creepy clown mask, and this person was looking right up at me. They wore normal clothes of a sweatshirt and jeans, but the clown mask went completely over the person's head, had long hair, and looked really scary. I instantly was freaked out, and I reached around and found my cell phone on the desk. I was ready to call 911 if anything happened. I tried to remember if all the doors were locked downstairs, and I thought that they were. I didn't want to go back to the window, but decided to carefully look. I went to the floor and ducked down. Then I looked over to the window and saw the clown man still standing there. He was still looking up at me. My windows had no cover, I remember. I used to have blinds, but they broke from me playing basketball in my room, so now I had nothing. Being on the second floor overlooking the backyard, I didn't mind, but now this was a problem. I turned my bedroom lights off and then decided to go downstairs and make sure that the doors were locked. I left my bedroom and then went downstairs. When I got to the front door, I saw that it was in fact locked. Then I carefully got to the back and saw that one was locked as well. So at that point, I went back up to my bedroom. When I got there though, the clown was now gone. I was so relieved to see that he had left. I went around the house and covered every window except for my own and the other bedroom ones. I also looked out of all the windows before covering them to see if the clown was still anywhere in sight. Thankfully, he was not. About an hour later, my parents and siblings returned home. I told them about the clown, and they figured that it was just someone joking around. So later that night, my parents went to bed. I stayed up late playing video games because it was a weekend, and I didn't have school the next day. So it was probably after midnight, and I remember that I saw the clown again. He was once more standing in around the same spot as before and looking up at me. I was super creeped out now. I wanted to tell my parents, so I left my bedroom and went out into the hallway, but everyone had gone to bed and I didn't want to wake them up. My siblings' doors were also closed and all the lights were off. I debated waking everybody up, but I also didn't want to seem like a wimp, so I went back into my bedroom and decided to watch the clown and see what he would do. He stood there just a little while longer. Now, my bedroom lights were off and had been for a while, but then the clown started waving at me. I was so creeped out that I ran and found a random blanket and then just ran back to the window and covered it. I held it there in place for a while and then went around and found some tape in my room and taped the blanket to the wall. I didn't want to look out there. I stayed up for a little while longer, too scared to go to bed. Finally, I looked again and the clown was now gone. After that, I was able to go to sleep. But that experience with the clown really freaked me out. It's still something that I think about sometimes. I wonder who that was and why they chose to go to our backyard and look in my bedroom window. This happened a few years ago. For a little background, I live with my wife in a house that's in a very quiet neighborhood and a rural area. We live about 2 hours from the closest really major city. To go there, we have to get on a highway and drive on that for almost the entire way. I tell you this because one time my wife and I went to a sports game that was taking place in the city 2 hours away. We tried to go to a few games a season, but obviously it's a long drive. But it's really not that bad because it's not that difficult of a drive, and here and there I don't mind it.
We got down there, parked in a ramp in the city, and then attended the game. Afterwards, when it ended, it was probably about 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night. For the whole time to that point, things had gone well. We got back to our car in the ramp and then left. As you could imagine, the traffic following the game was quite bad. For the first initial streets surrounding the stadium, it was really busy and there was a bit of a traffic jam, and I didn't even park that close. I parked several blocks away. It took a good 10 minutes before we left downtown and got onto the highway. I remember that when we got to the stoplight right before getting onto the highway, we were sitting next to this other car. My wife told me to look over, and so I did. There in the car next to us was 4 men sitting in this small 4-door sedan. They were all wearing clown masks over their heads, and each mask was rather scary looking. It wasn't the typical funny clown masks, but the creepier ones. But we obviously were not scared, but they looked over at us and were all staring. I figured they were just kids having fun, trying to get reactions out of people. But I'm not going to lie, it was a pretty creepy sight, especially with it being nighttime. They did not look away, and they all just stared at us. My wife did an overly exaggerated reaction as if she were really scared as a joke, and I just laughed. I thought to myself, the things you see in the big city. Anytime there's a large amount of people around, you're bound to see some interesting stuff. I should also mention that these masks really didn't have anything to do with the sports game. Like, none of the teams or players had anything to do with clowns, so it was not a joke to one of the players or something like that. This was totally random, it seemed. And it wasn't Halloween time either. So anyways, eventually the light turned green, and we got out onto the highway. It started out with there being a lot of other cars, and the farther north we drove, the less and less cars there were. We were driving almost even with the clown car for a while, just because there was so much traffic we didn't have much of a choice. After probably 10 minutes on that highway, the clown car eventually started going faster, and it went way ahead of us. Soon it was completely out of our sight, and we pretty much forgot about it. We continued the drive home, and my wife and I were just talking casually about the game and whatever. After probably an hour of driving, the roads were now extremely quiet. You would only see another car here and there, because we were completely out of the city and in the suburbs area and getting out into the country now. We kept driving, and soon I saw that I was coming up on a car in front of us. It was going sort of slow, nothing crazy, but the speed limit was 70 and the car was probably going 70. I was going like 75 or so. Without giving it much thought, I switched into the left lane to pass the slower car. When I did, my wife looked over and mentioned that those were the clown guys. I looked and saw that it was in fact them. All 4 of the men were still wearing the clown masks. This surprised me. I figured that it was just a thing they did around the large crowd of people at the game. Surely they would want to take those uncomfortable masks off their heads, but I guess not. They looked over at us once more, and we just passed them by and then changed lanes again. The clown car didn't speed up or anything. It just kept driving at the same speed, and so did I. So pretty soon, I went way ahead of them, and they disappeared in my rearview mirror. I was shocked that they were still driving this far north, but I figured that that would be the last time that we saw them. Probably 20 minutes later or so, I saw that we needed gas, so I took the next exit to refuel. This was still out in the country in a rural area. After taking the exit, I stopped at the gas station, which was right off the highway and surrounded by mostly wilderness. I pulled in, stopped at a pump, and then got out. As I was starting to fuel the car, I looked around the quiet road. I noticed another car driving in, which was the only other car in the area. The car entered the gas station, and I thought to myself, no way. It was the clown car. They drove up to a gas pump on the other side of the station, not really by me at all. As I was standing by my car, I watched a single clown get out and then start getting gas. He still had the mask on his head. I could not believe that I kept seeing them. Nothing led me to believe that they were following us. It all seemed like just a big coincidence. At one point, the clown looked over at me, and the others in the car did as well. I just looked away and finished fueling my car. Then I got back in, and my wife was already talking about how she couldn't believe the clowns were here too. We then left the gas station and got back onto the road. We didn't see the clowns leaving when we did or anything. So by this point, we had like a half hour of driving left before we were home. It went by pretty smooth, as there were really no other cars out at this time. By the time we approached the exit, it was almost midnight. As we did, we saw headlights a ways back. We had been pretty much the only car on the road to that point. So we took the exit and started driving down the smaller road. We noticed the car from the highway taking the exit as well. I wondered if it was the clown. We drove down the street and came up to a stop sign. From there, we just had to go about another half mile and then turn left to get to our neighborhood. When we slowed down and got to the stop sign, the car behind us got closer. When it did, I saw that it was the clowns. We could not believe it. How on earth were they still by us? Were they following us? We kept going down the street, and it was literally just us 2 cars.
Then, when it was time to turn left, we did, and they did not. The clowns kept driving down the road. We got home a short time later, and everything was fine. We went to bed and didn't see the clowns at all that night or anything. Now, probably 2 days later, I think it was, my wife was on one of those internet neighborhood pages for our small city. She said that somebody posted that they saw someone dressed as a clown running through their backyard at night. Another person posted that they had seen someone with a clown mask on their trail camera. So it seemed as though the clowns were out causing problems, and I'm sure that it was those same guys. What were they doing? I didn't see them or hear anything more about them after that, but I still think it's so crazy how I literally saw them downtown, and then they went all the way to our small town 2 hours away. Were they following us somehow? I'm not sure, but it's a pretty crazy coincidence if not. This isn't a story about a direct interaction with a clown, but it still freaks me out, especially since we still live in the same house with our family. It started on a Saturday morning. I was getting coffee when I noticed something strange in the living room. A clown costume laid crumpled on the floor. I glanced at my wife, who was busy with our 2 kids. Pointing to the costume, I asked my wife what the deal with the clown costume was and if the kids brought it home from somewhere. She looked over, her face scrunched up in confusion. She said she had never seen it before and the kids had not brought it home. I tossed it in the trash can, hoping it was just a prank from a neighbor that we would hear about from them over dinner later or something. We enjoyed the rest of our weekend and didn't think about the costume much. We hadn't heard anything from our neighbors and figured that the explanation for the costume being there would turn up at some point. By Tuesday, I had almost forgotten about it. I was the first one home that day, as the wife and kids were still at work and school. As I pulled into the driveway, I couldn't believe what I saw. There, hanging from a low branch of our oak tree, was the clown costume. I went over and examined the costume, and it appeared to be the same one that I had thrown away on Saturday. The trash had already been emptied, so I couldn't check to see if somebody had been through our trash and tore the bag open. That night, I called the neighbors nearby that we were good friends with, and asked about the costume and if they were pranking us. All the neighbors were confused and swore to me that they had nothing to do with it. I didn't want to freak out my wife and kids, so I decided not to tell them about the reappearance of the costume, and this time I disposed of it at my work dumpster the next day. I was a bit concerned that somebody we didn't know had placed the costume inside our house and had been through our trash to retrieve it. I don't know why anybody would pull such an elaborate prank like this just to scare us. From that point on, though, I was a lot more careful about having the door locked at all times, even when we were home, and watching out for anybody who seemed to be snooping around our property. A while back, I was selling an iPad on Facebook Marketplace. I took a few pictures of it and then posted the listing online. I remember that sometime the next day, I got a message from somebody on Facebook about it. However, it was not what I expected. The person's profile was a creepy picture of a clown, and their name was just Clown. I thought that it was kind of weird, but they asked if the iPad was still available. I said yes. I thought that maybe the person was young or had that profile as a joke or something. They said that they wanted to buy it and asked me when they could. This person seemed normal enough through our messages, so I said they could buy it. We agreed to the next day at 6 p.m. I gave this clown person my address, which looking back I should not have done. I didn't think of it at the time, but that could be a dangerous thing. I lived in a house with my wife and child, and I didn't think that anything bad could happen. I would be home the whole time and was just going to sell an iPad quickly. The following evening at 6 p.m., no one showed up. I texted the clown on Facebook and asked him if he was still coming. He never responded. This happens though. There's people all the time that say they'll buy something and then they never show up. It's rude to make an appointment and not even let me know that you're not going to be there, but still, it happens. The night went on and I got no response and nobody showed up. I was curious to see who this person even was, because their Facebook profile was just them dressed as a creepy-looking clown. So that same night, I happened to be up late. I'm a bit of a night owl, and it was probably like 11 o'clock p.m. I saw that I got a message on Facebook from the clown. I thought that maybe he was going to say why he didn't come earlier, but instead he said, "I'm here." I was confused. I thought maybe he had been there earlier and the message didn't show up until now for some reason. I texted back saying, "Wait a minute, are you here right now at 11 p.m.? He did not respond.
I got up and walked over to the living room. I looked out of a window and saw the clown there. There was this creepy-looking clown just standing in our front yard looking at the house. I looked out of the window and saw him there. There was a creepy-looking clown just standing in our front yard looking at the house. He was just standing there, not moving. It was really creepy. I texted the guy again, but he didn't answer. I could see that he was not on his phone. I went over to the door and opened it just a crack. I yelled out to the guy asking why he was here so late. He did not respond. He just stood there staring at me. I told him I wasn't going to sell him the iPad now. I asked him to come back at a normal hour and not dressed as a clown. Still, he said nothing and just kept standing there staring at me. I was too creeped out. Then he started to walk slowly towards me. I quickly shut the door, locked it, and walked away from the door and walked over to the window again. I watched him and he walked up the driveway a bit and then turned around and walked back. He got to the street and then slowly walked away. When he was out of my sight, I went on Facebook and told him not to come back. Thankfully, he didn't. I never saw him again, but I stopped using Facebook Marketplace after that.
Last year, a few days away from Halloween, some friends and I were hanging out. After a while of us playing board games and video games, we wanted to go outside and play some night games. After about an hour of us playing some generic games, we decided to play Fugitive. For those of you who don't know what Fugitive is, there are two teams. One team goes and hides, and after a while they must make it back to a designated safe zone undetected while the other team tries to tag them. So the 6 of us split up into 2 teams and we went our separate ways. Me and 2 of my friends were the ones who were supposed to hide. One of us hid in a casket. It was a Halloween decoration near the safe zone. The other friend and I hid under the porch of where the seekers were counting. We waited for about 10 minutes and then decided to head to the safe zone that was just down the street. As we snuck down, we saw our friend sitting at the safe zone, which was at the front of his house. So we went over and started talking while waiting for the seekers to realize they had lost. Then, out of nowhere, this old car with chipped white paint pulled up to the house. My friend just thought that it was his sister's friend dropping his sister off, but nobody got out of the car. After 5 minutes, still nobody had gotten out. Man, we should have run away, but we just kept talking. After 5 minutes, we heard the car doors open, and then 2 guys came out of the car all dressed in black except for a white clown mask. As they were walking towards us, we tried to play it cool. We kept saying stuff like, "Hey, what's up?" or "What's going on?" Once they came up to us, they just kept staring at us. My friends and I kept trying to play it cool, but I could see it on my friends' faces. We were all scared. Then one of the clowns started just growling at us like some creepy animal or something, while the other one started talking to us saying creepy stuff like, "You teens shouldn't be out this late," or "You guys really should be more careful." He said this in the creepiest monotone voice also. I don't know why, but we were still trying to play it cool, and my friend said, "Let me get a picture of you." As he was about to take a picture, the clown quickly jerked his head forward as soon as the flash began. My friend only got a picture of his left eye and forehead. I also did something stupid and reached out my hand with a cough drop in it to give to the clown who had been growling, saying that he must have a raspy throat. As I was handing it to him, he grabbed my hand, but I was able to wiggle it free as soon as I could. Now I knew that these guys weren't afraid to grab us, which made us even more terrified. I looked behind us for a route to run. My only thought was that we had to kick the clowns in the crotch and then take off running. However, one of my friends finally said, "Please just leave us alone," and they surprisingly did. They started walking backwards, staring at us the entire way back to the car. They got in, and then they sped off. I just looked at my friends, and we couldn't say anything. We were all just terrified. After a minute, we saw our other friends, the Seekers, come around the corner. We went to our friend's house and told his dad, but he just laughed and said it was nothing. So we went to our other friend's house and told him what happened. His dad said he would drive us all home, even though we all lived close to each other. Then, later that night, after I was home, I heard a car pull up in front of my house. I looked outside, and it was the same old white car. I couldn't move, I was so scared. And then the passenger side window opened, and that same clown looked me dead in the eyes through the windows. The clown waved at me, and then the car sped off. I'm not even sure how they found out where I lived. They either followed us home, or must have already known who I was and where I lived. Even if they were just pranksters, it still scared the life out of me. For a little bit of background to this story, I live alone. My house is way out in the country, and it's in a very quiet city. The street has no sidewalk, and in fact is a cul-de-sac, and I'm towards the end of it. My house isn't that big or anything, but everyone's yard is a decent size. Everything in general is more spread out, and I know most of my neighbors, and most of them know me as well. So going back to last year, it all started one night. I remember that I was at home, and it was a little bit later at night. For whatever reason, I was looking out one of the front windows. I don't remember exactly why I was, but I just know that I saw somebody jogging down the street. It was a man who was somewhat tall and thin, and he jogged pretty slow down the side of the street. He was kind of looking around as he jogged, like he was really taking in the scene that was around him. It wasn't like the typical jogger who is zoned in on running. He ended up soon going out of my sight. Now, this is really nothing strange, but it was out of the ordinary for my neighborhood. We literally never had joggers or people walking down the road. I knew this guy wasn't one of the neighbors, and for whatever reason, it seemed kind of odd to me. Obviously, though, there was nothing that I could do about it, and ultimately, I didn't think that it was anything. The most logical thought is that the guy lived a ways away and was just out for a jog, or maybe he was staying with a neighbor. It was a little strange that it was like 10 p.m. though. The next night, even a little bit later than that, I happened to notice the guy again. I promise you, I don't just sit and stare out my front window all night, so I don't know how I happened to see him 2 nights in a row, but I did. It gets worse though, because I actually saw him again later that night. This time he was walking though, and once again looking around at all the houses. He walked to the end of the cul-de-sac, then walked back. I still didn't think too much of it. By the next day, I had forgotten all about the guy. Now, fast forward to the next night. No, I didn't see the jogging man again this night. I just had a normal evening, and when it got late, I went up to go to bed. My bedroom is upstairs in the house and at the back end of it as well. I have a little window looking out to the backyard. Now, I kid you not, right as I was about to crawl into bed, I looked out of my window into the backyard. When I did, I saw a guy standing there walking along the back side of it, and he was wearing a clown mask. He wasn't dressed as a clown. He had normal clothing on of dark-colored sweatpants and a sweatshirt, but he was wearing this creepy clown mask over his face. It honestly kind of resembled Ronald McDonald. Based on the build though, I just thought that it might have been the guy who had been jogging around the neighborhood. It looked similar, and I was connecting the dots. The man continued walking, and then seemed to turn around and go back the opposite way. Soon he was out of my sight, and appeared to maybe be off my property as well. I decided to go downstairs and investigate. When I got down there, I looked out of just about every window in the house. I didn't see the guy, and I figured that he was gone. I wasn't sure what that was all about. Why was a clown man in my backyard? And was it really the same man who had been jogging around the neighborhood? Something fishy was going on. I stayed up downstairs for a little while. I wasn't tired anymore, and I hate trying to sleep when I'm not tired, so I decided to sit down on the couch and watch TV until I could relax again and get sleepy. I sat down there for probably about 20 minutes. Then I heard a noise from the back end of the house. I got up and looked out of a window. The clown man was back. But not only that, now he was at my back door, and it looked like he was trying to get inside. I had a gun at the time, but it was upstairs in my bedroom and was locked up. I had never had to use it in my time living there, and had it for a long time. I should have brought it downstairs, but I just forgot, which makes me feel dumb looking back. But that's just what happened. I went over to the door and yelled loudly that I had a gun and I would shoot the guy if he broke in. I was hoping that would scare him off, and I wouldn't need to even get my gun. But his response was not what I was expecting. Not only did he not go away, but I heard from the other side of the door the clown laughing. It was this creepy laugh, the way you would expect a scary clown to. Then I ran upstairs to actually get my gun. By now my adrenaline was really going, and I got up into my room, got the gun, and then went back downstairs. However, when I arrived back down there, the clown was gone. I opened up the back door and looked around. I went all through the backyard, but he wasn't there. He must have finally ran away. I called the police and reported a suspicious clown man and possible attempted break-in. They came to my house and I spoke with them for a while. After that night, he did not return, and I also didn't see the jogging man either. I really think that it was the same guy, and that possibly he was scouting out the houses disguised as a jogger or something, because that was really suspicious.
This happened not that long ago. I went to the grocery store one night that was kind of near my house. It was only like 10 minutes away. I was inside the grocery store for maybe 30 minutes. Inside, things were not very busy, and it was maybe 9 p.m. When I left the grocery store, I went back to my car.
which was parked at about the middle of the parking lot. There were cars scattered all around, but not too many. I noticed that there was a car parked right next to mine though that wasn't there before. I only really noticed it because there were lots of open spaces around it. The car parked next to mine was a silver-colored sedan. I didn't pay it much attention and started loading my groceries into the back of my car. But when I was just about done, I glanced over at the car that was parked next to me and noticed somebody sitting in the driver's seat. It appeared to be a man, and he was wearing a clown mask. This mask in particular was really creepy looking. It wasn't one of those cheap ones, but a really detailed one. I didn't know why he was wearing it, because it wasn't anywhere near Halloween. It just seemed kind of random and odd. He wasn't looking at me though. I put my cart back and then went to my driver's door and got inside. It was then that I looked over and noticed that the clown guy was looking right at me from inside his car. He didn't wave or move or anything, but was just staring in my direction. I smiled at him, figuring that it was some kind of a joke. Then I started my engine and drove away. As soon as my car started, he started his car as well. When I began driving, he did the same. I watched his car follow mine to the end of the parking lot, and I was worried. Immediately, it seemed like this clown guy was trying to follow me. I left the parking lot and went onto a quiet road, and then that one took me to a busier one. The clown drove behind me the whole way. The roads were pretty quiet with it being later at night. There was not a good chance that he could get stuck in traffic trying to follow me or something. If it was rush hour, that might have been a possibility. Instead, he easily stayed on my tail as I drove down the highway. After maybe 5 minutes there, I was getting worried of what I would do. I couldn't let this guy follow me all the way back home. So when I was driving, I called my boyfriend to tell him the situation. He was really confused when I told him a clown was following me on the highway. He thought I was joking at first and started laughing. I told him that I was serious and this was not a joke. Still, he didn't seem to take it as serious as I was. I told him that I was going to drive to his house. My boyfriend's house is about 5 minutes away from mine. He said that was fine with him and told me not to worry about it. I did feel a little bit better knowing he wasn't too concerned, but still, this clown guy was really creeping me out. It's one thing to dress as a clown later at night, but it's another to follow somebody home. Several minutes later, I exited the highway, followed by the clown. Then I took a quiet road for about a mile before the turnoff for my boyfriend's street. When I turned, the clown behind me did as well. The street was very quiet at this time of night. My boyfriend's house was about halfway down the street and on the right side. When I reached it, I began pulling into the driveway. It seemed as though the clown was going to do the same thing. That's when I saw the door to the house open and my boyfriend running out. He was wearing a clown mask of his own, one that he wore at a Halloween party a couple of years ago. He was holding a yellow wiffle ball bat as well and waving it around like a crazy person. The clown in the car behind me started pulling into the driveway and then stopped. My boyfriend was screaming like a madman and went running straight for the clown's car behind me. Then the clown backed out and drove away before my boyfriend could reach him. I got out of the car and asked my boyfriend if he was out of his mind. I couldn't believe what he was doing. He took his mask off and started laughing, calling the other clown a wimp for running away. We went inside after that, and I ended up being really glad that he did that. It could have been extremely dangerous though. Who knows who that guy in the clown mask was and what he wanted? Maybe that was just his way of disguising himself, and me being a young woman, he was trying to stalk me. I'm really not sure, but I'm glad that my boyfriend considered the whole thing one big joke. He told me that he thought of the idea when I told him I was going to his place. He remembered the clown mask and thought he would out-clown the clown. I'm really glad that it worked.
This is something that happened just a few weeks ago. It's still very fresh in my mind, and it gives me the creeps to think back to it. So it was an average night, and I was at home by myself. I live alone in an apartment building. I have a one-bedroom place on the 4th floor of the building. Overall, the place is nice, and nothing strange happened in my time here. This particular night, I did not have work the next day, so I was staying up late. I was just in my living room hanging out for a while, watching TV and playing around on my phone. Eventually, I got tired and decided to go to bed. By this point, it was probably like 1 o'clock in the morning or so.
I turned off the TV, then turned out all the lights and was getting ready to get in bed. However, out of nowhere, I heard the sound of a knock on my apartment door. Instantly, I really got the creeps. When you're alone in a silent and dark apartment in the middle of the night, hearing a knock on the door has a different kind of effect. I wondered who on earth it could be. I slowly and quietly walked over to my front door. In that time period, whoever was there did not knock again. I did not dare open the door, but instead I looked through the peephole. When I did, I saw a man standing there wearing a creepy clown mask. It was a scary sight to see. I almost jumped back and ran away. He wasn't directly looking at me or anything, but standing like he was waiting for me to open the door. But I did not. I was not sure if he knew I was there on the other side of the door looking at him or not. I remained there and watched him. This was really weird because it was not anywhere near Halloween time, so why would someone be wearing this creepy clown mask? The guy kept standing around. He wasn't completely still, and a few times he took a step back and looked around, but he remained at the door a lot longer than I thought he would. I kept watching and didn't look away. Eventually, after what I would estimate to be about 2 or 3 minutes, he walked off down the hallway. I kept watching to make sure that he wouldn't come back. After about 5 minutes, I finally went to bed. Since then, he still hasn't come back or anything, but I'm still wondering who it was and why he did it. I'm not aware of him knocking on anybody else's door. I'm sure that I would have heard it if he did. I don't know any of my neighbors, and I don't know if anyone would pull a prank like that. I wonder what would have happened if I had answered the door, but I'm really glad I didn't. This story is one of the scariest things to happen in my childhood. It happened when I was 7 years old. This was back about 20 years ago or so, and I had recently gotten a Game Boy for my birthday. I took it everywhere and played it non-stop. I was on a Little League baseball team back then, and I don't remember much about it, but I know that on this night I had a practice that my mom took me to. On the way back home, she stopped at McDonald's, and we both got out to go inside. I remember it was dark out, and I'm not sure what time it was, but it wasn't very busy and the parking lot was pretty quiet. She parked around back, and we went inside and ordered. As my mom was ordering, I realized I had left my Game Boy in her car. I decided to go back out to the car and get it by myself. I walked away from my mom and into the parking lot, and around to the back where she had parked. When I got there, I noticed a van drive slowly through the parking lot and parked next to my mom's car. As I approached the car, I saw the passenger's door to the van open and a clown that looked just like Ronald McDonald step out. He was looking right at me and smiled big and said hello. I wasn't really a fan of clowns at all, and I just kind of waved at him, then tried to open the door to my mom's car, but realized that it was locked. I remember the clown then told me he was Ronald McDonald. I said hi, and then decided it would be best if I went back inside. Even though I was a little kid, the clown just creeped me out in the situation that we were in. I started to turn, but the clown then asked me if I liked Happy Meals. I said yes, and he pulled out the latest toy that was in the Happy Meals. I remember I always liked to collect the toys they gave out back then, and this one was one of the cooler ones. It was some action figure thing, and the clown had 4 of the 8 that you could collect, and it interested me a little bit. He told me he'd like to give them all to me for free, and that it was my lucky day. I should have known better, but I figured it was a good idea, so I told him I'd like him. He opened the side door to his van, and inside I saw a pile of toys ranging from cars to action figures and all kinds of other ones. I started to walk a little closer when I heard my mother's voice calling to me. The clown then jumped inside the side door of the van, and I noticed another man in the driver's seat yell at the clown to go, and then he shut the door in my face. I turned to my mom, who was now sprinting in my direction. I went to her as the van sped out of the parking lot. My mom hugged me and gave me a lecture about talking to strangers, then asked me about what happened. At the time, I was a little kid, but over the years I've thought about this all the time, and how I possibly narrowly avoided being abducted. When my stepdad was growing up, his dad was in the Air Force very briefly. When my stepdad was around 5 or 6 years old, his dad was deployed in Missouri, and they lived in a suburb right outside of the base. His dad worked during the night, and his mom stayed home. My stepdad wasn't much of a sleeper at that age, and he usually stayed up until the late hours of the night with his mom. So one night at around 2 a.m., my stepdad was playing in their living room with some yarn, and his mom decided to take a shower. In the living room, there's a sliding glass door that had no blinds and led to the backyard, which was not fenced in. There was also a pathway that wrapped around the neighborhood and cut through the backyards. So my stepdad was sitting on the carpet playing with the yarn when something outside caught his eye. There wasn't a whole lot of lampposts behind the house where the pathway was, but their porch light was on, and that shed light onto part of the pathway. Standing on the lit pathway was a clown holding a balloon. Now, my stepdad knew something wasn't right, because what kind of a person decides to dress up as a clown in the middle of the night and stand on a pathway? He started to yell for his mom. Well, when the clown noticed this, he started bolting towards the sliding glass door, and my stepdad freaked out and started screaming while running down the hallway to the bathroom. He told his mom what happened, and when they went back to investigate, the clown was gone. They called the police, but they couldn't really do anything since the clown was on public property, and they didn't really think a 5-year-old kid could be a reliable witness. The clown never came around again, and my stepdad stopped staying up so late, so he's not sure if the clown came back or not. He's not sure what the clown's intentions were, but to this day, he's terrified of clowns.
This story happened several years ago. I'm 22 years old now, and at the time I believe I was about 14 or 15. It was the summertime, and I lived at home with my parents in our pretty average house. It was nighttime, and I had gone to bed after a hard day of playing video games and enjoying the warm weather. I was sleeping great until I woke up in the middle of the night for seemingly no reason. I rolled over in bed to see on my clock that the time was almost 3 in the morning. I then casually looked around my dark room and then out the window which was beside my bed. When I did, I saw there was the face of a clown looking directly into my bedroom window and staring right at me. It was a really creepy looking clown. My heart immediately started pounding and I jumped back. When I did, the clown suddenly ducked down from the window and then disappeared out of sight. I then screamed and ran out of my room terrified. I ran into the living room, and my parents must have heard me yelling, because I heard the door to their room open and saw them come out. I told them there was a clown right outside my bedroom window. They went into my bedroom and looked around, and after that went outside and walked around the house. Of course, whoever had been there was now gone. When my parents came back inside, my mom told me that maybe I was just having a bad dream. It did seem really strange for something like this to happen, because our neighborhood had a really good reputation of low crime. In fact, we rarely ever had people knock on our door. It took me a while, but I was able to eventually fall back asleep. The next day, I started to think that I probably was just dreaming the whole thing the night before. It just seemed a little too strange for even myself to believe, and it all happened so fast. I was feeling better at that point, and wasn't scared at all to go to bed. When the time came, I got ready to go to sleep, turned the lights off, and laid down. I was getting very relaxed and starting to feel sleepy, but then I thought I heard something from my window. It was a very small and quiet noise. Not a knocking or a scratching, but the sound of the window just being touched. Had it not been completely silent in my room, I definitely would have never heard it. I opened my eyes and looked to the window. When I did, I was staring directly at a man in a creepy clown mask. This time I knew I wasn't dreaming or imagining this, because I hadn't even fallen asleep yet. I was in shock and felt like I couldn't move. The clown was just staring at me. Finally, I started screaming again like a little kid and got up and ran to my parents' room. They heard me once again and got up. They then went into my room, and this time I heard my dad yelling. He had seen the clown, and he then ran outside to chase the guy. The guy ended up getting away long before my dad could catch up with him. My parents called the police after that, and they came out to our house and talked to us. The guy that was dressed as a clown was never found, but he never came back either. To this day, I don't know who he was or what he was trying to do.
This is something that happened a long time ago when I was younger.
At the time, it seemed like one of the scariest things ever. Looking back, it's not that crazy, but it still seems pretty weird. I was probably about 7 or 8 years old, and I was out with my sister and dad one time. I don't really remember where we were early in the day. Maybe we were shopping at the store or something. But I remember that we went to McDonald's, which was me and my sister's favorite restaurant. This was back when the Happy Meal toys were really good, and we liked to collect them. So my sister and I ordered Happy Meals, and I remember that us and my dad went to eat outside. My dad was talking on the phone to someone from work or something. I just remember that he seemed really invested in the conversation. The McDonald's had a pretty good outside area from what I remember. We live in an area with a pretty good climate and where it doesn't rain much. As we were outside for a while, my sister and I started playing catch. The Happy Meal toy was some kind of ball as one of the toys that you could get. So we started tossing it back and forth to each other while my dad was still sitting at the table talking on the phone. My sister threw it way over my head one time and I couldn't catch it. The ball bounced out of the area where we were, and then it kind of rolled around the corner and into the parking lot. I was chasing after it as the ball rolled, and eventually made it to the middle of the parking lot. There were not that many cars in the parking lot, but a few that were scattered around. When I walked over and picked up the ball, I looked to the car that I was closest to. It was a pretty average-looking car, but the driver was looking over at me. It was this guy that was completely dressed as Ronald McDonald the Clown, but it was creepier. Like it wasn't quite correct, or it was made to look scary. Instantly, it made me scared. He was looking right at me and just sitting in the driver's seat of the car. I quickly ran back over to where my dad and sister were. From there, we could not see the cars. I told my sister about seeing the guy. She wanted to see for herself, so I remember that we walked back over to the parking lot. We did not go as close, but just stood on the edge of the grass. When we looked out, we saw the car, but it now looked like nobody was in the driver's seat. So we went back over to where my dad was. Eventually, maybe 10 minutes later, we left. We walked past the McDonald's, and I looked inside to see if the clown had gone in, but I didn't notice him. We got to our car and then went inside. As we were driving away, we passed by the car that the Ronald McDonald was in. But when we did, we both saw him. He was now in the back seat of the car, looking out the rear window directly at us. It was really creepy. My sister and I both reacted, but our dad didn't see the guy. We drove away, and our dad thought that it was funny, but I remember how creepy it seemed. Why was some guy just dressed like Ronald McDonald with his face painted and everything, and then he just sits in his car? That seems really strange.
This happened several years ago. I happened to be driving in the city one night and was driving home afterwards. I lived about 40 minutes away from the city in a relatively quiet suburb. When I was driving back, I remember I had just left downtown and it was pretty late, almost midnight. I pulled up to a stoplight, which was red. As I was sitting there, I saw a car pull up beside mine, and I could hear the loud engine. It sounded bad, like the car was going to break down at any moment. Because of this, it caused me to look over, and when I did, I saw the driver of the car was wearing a clown mask. He looked over at me, and then he pointed. It was kind of creepy with it being late at night and stuff, but I laughed it off. I smiled and waved at him, and a moment later, the light turned green, and he sped off in front of me. I drove home, mostly just taking this one long and busy highway that went all the way from the city, right near where my house was. At this time of night, the road was very quiet, and I didn't see many other cars at all. I was able to make it home faster than usual because of this. It was barely 30 minutes later when I had reached the exit of the highway that I would take to go home. But just before the exit, I noticed a car in front of me. It was the same car that the guy with the clown mask was in. I recognized it because of how old and beat up it was. He was turning at the same place where I would turn. I didn't even know he had still been on this road. He was driving slower now, and I caught up with him. My street was not all that long, and I hadn't seen this car before. I pulled onto the street behind him, and thankfully, he drove past my driveway, and I pulled into it. I watched him keep driving down the street. I got out of my car and began to walk up to my house. As I had only made it a few feet away from my car, though, I started to hear screeching down the road. I took a couple of steps back to look. Then, I watched as the car came roaring back down the street towards my house. I watched the car speed at an unusually fast pace down my street and pull right into my driveway. I scrambled to get inside and quickly got to my doorstep and unlocked the door. I heard the car come to a stop in my driveway, and then the door open and slam shut. Finally, I was able to open my door and I got inside and locked it behind me. I didn't even want to look outside but at the same time, I felt like I had to. I peeked out my living room window, hoping that I would not be visible from the outside. As I did, I watched the clown guy get out of his car and walk up to my front step. He then just stood there. He was just staring at my front door, about 10 feet away. I was frozen still, too afraid to move or let him out of my sight. I feared if I moved, he would see me, and I did not know if he currently knew where I was. I didn't think he did, because he never looked directly at me. He would occasionally look around, but never at me. This went on for almost 30 minutes. I considered calling the police, but again, was too afraid to move. Finally, at last, I watched him walk away slowly back to his car. He then got inside and drove away. I watched outside for another 5 minutes or so, just in case he were to come back, before I finally left the front window. I checked the window again probably 10 times before I finally went to bed that night. Thankfully, he never came back. I've always wondered who he was, and if it was just a coincidence he drove to my street. After all, he was driving ahead of me on the highway most of the time. It still gives me the creeps to think about it, though. It was late September 2016, and the supposed killer clown sightings were all over social media. I didn't think much of it until one Saturday night when I decided to go for a walk. I lived in a quiet suburb, and the streets were usually empty after dark. The sun had just set, and a cool breeze was starting to blow. I grabbed my headphones and began walking. I turned down a side street that led to a small park. The moon was out, and the path was lit by scattered streetlights. I remember thinking how peaceful it was, but then I saw something out of the corner of my eye. At the edge of the park, near the playground, a figure stood still. My heart dropped when I realized it was a clown. At first, I thought it was somebody playing a prank. The clown was dressed in a bright costume with exaggerated features painted on its face. It didn't move, and it just stared at me. I pulled my headphones out to make sure the clown wasn't saying anything. I should have turned back right then, but I was too curious. I took a few hesitant steps towards the park, and the clown remained motionless. I still wasn't even sure if it was a real person. I wanted to get closer to see if it was a cutout or a statue of some sort. As I approached a bit closer, the clown suddenly turned and ran deeper into the park. I should have turned back and gone home, but I felt an overwhelming urge to follow. As I got closer, I saw the clown stop near the swings. It started to sway back and forth, its movements erratic. I called out, "Hey, is everything okay?" The clown turned their face, obscured by shadow. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then it took a step towards me. I instinctively stepped back, and that's when I noticed something glinting in its hand. It looked like a knife. I didn't look back as I sprinted down the path. I could hear the rustle of leaves and the sound of footsteps chasing behind me. I raced through the neighborhood, desperate to lose the clown and get home. I'm not exactly sure when, but somehow I had separated myself from the clown, or maybe they had just given up. I'm very grateful that I was in pretty good shape, and I was able to outrun the clown. Or maybe the clown was in really bad shape. Who knows? But as I approached my front door, I turned to look back and make sure the clown wasn't anywhere behind me. It wasn't, and I rushed inside, locked the door, and leaned against it, trying to catch my breath. My heart raced as I glanced out the window, and it was reassuring to see that the street was still empty. I wanted to believe that it was just a prank, but as I laid in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something horrible. It was Halloween night 2022. I live alone in a neighborhood that's not that busy. I have a house and about an average-sized yard. But on my street there are not a ton of houses, so I will maybe get like 10 trick-or-treaters a year. Still, I get candy for them, and I just give each kid a lot of candy, so I'm sure that they're happy about it. So on this night, from the early evening until about 8 o'clock, I got the usual amount of trick-or-treaters. It was mostly a pretty quiet night. Then, at like 9 o'clock or so, there was a knock at my front door. I went over to look, thinking that it was just another trick-or-treater, but it was not. There were about 5 grown men all standing there. Each of them were wearing full head masks of various creepy characters. I don't know who all the characters were, just that one of them was a clown and another was like an old man mask.
Aside from the masks though, they were just wearing normal clothes. They seemed like grown men, because most of them appeared to be around 6 feet tall or taller. Either way, I decided that I didn't want to answer the door for these guys, so I went back over to the living room and sat down. However, about a minute later, they knocked again. This time, it was louder. I didn't get up thinking that they would not knock a third time, but they did. This time, it was even more loud. I was frustrated and got up to walk over to the door. I supposed that I would answer and see what the guys wanted. But as I was walking over there, I heard someone try opening my front door, which was locked. As I approached, I saw out the living room window one of the men running by and another approaching the window. The guy who went to the window then started to bang on it. Meanwhile, I then heard knocking at my back door, which was really loud. Then I heard another banging coming from a window at the other end of my house. It seemed as though the men had split up and were all at different parts of my house now, and they were all either trying to actively enter my home or bang on a window or door. It was a pretty scary thing, and I decided to call the cops. I knew that I couldn't fight off 5 grown men, and it sure seemed like they were trying to break and enter. I went down in my basement and called the police from there. For a while I heard the banging as I waited. Eventually though, it stopped. Unfortunately, all the men ran off before the cops got there. After officers arrived, I went out and talked with them about what had happened. They pretty much just made a report, drove down the street and looked around a little and then left. I was happy that the guys were gone, and I was hoping that it was just a Halloween prank that went too far. Definitely way too far. For the next few hours, things were fine. Then I went to bed. However, I was awoken to the loud sounds of banging coming from all around my house again. It was pretty much the same thing as before. They were at all angles of my house, trying doorknobs and banging on windows. I got up and didn't know what to do. They did this for about a minute. Then they stopped. I went to a window and saw the same guys, still wearing those masks, running away. I didn't call the police again. I stayed up for a little while, seeing if they would return, but they did not, and then I went back to bed. After that night, it never happened again. I obviously don't know who those guys were because they had masks on. They were probably just trying to scare people on Halloween, but they took it way too far. Back when the killer clown sightings were a thing, my friend and I decided to have some fun. I have no idea how many clowns dressed up scaring people were real killers or just people trying to spook someone, but my friends and I were some of those in the category that were bored and just wanted to scare some people for fun. Say whatever you want about us, we knew it was overall a dumb idea and that it was generally not nice, but we never hurt anyone or even got that close to people. We live in Texas and would travel to various parts of the state on weekends under the guise of just going out to hang out all night at each other's houses. During one of our final scares, we got involved in something that could have turned violent. Along some back roads, there's a local spot and area where couples go to drink, mess around, and all that jazz. We were going there to see if we could spook some couples. When we arrived, there was just one couple standing outside a red pickup truck. A big blonde guy and some redhead girl, probably 2/3 his size. They were arguing very loudly, and we didn't jump out of the woods to scare them yet because it was getting heated. Basically, to sum it up, she was telling the guy that it was over, and she was going to call her friends to pick her up so she could leave. Me and my crew were hiding in the trees when the guy basically punched her down on the ground. He started beating her and screaming things like, "I won't ever let you leave." Despite being idiots for the whole clown situation, my friends and I were not the type of people to let a woman get beaten like that. So we ran out towards the guy, basically screaming and waving our hands in the air like freaks. Seeing a giant group of clowns run at you is a scary sight, and so the guy ran away. He got into his car and just drove off as fast as he could. The girl booked it too. She was crying and screaming for help and running away from us. Fearing the cops may come, we left. As we turned away to go back to our own truck, one of my friends pointed towards the spot the guy had forced the girl onto the ground at. My heart sank at that very moment when I saw what he left. It was a Bowie knife. We guessed he dropped it in a panic to get away from us. We drove out of there, and we had no idea what happened to the ex-couple after we left. All I know is, that night, our clown antics could have possibly saved someone's life.
When I was a kid, me and my friends used to go to this one park by our houses all the time. We lived in a large neighborhood with lots of houses, and there was this big park that had some open fields and other things that we would go to. We would play whatever games we were into at the time. We were about 10 years old on this night when we went to the park to play football. It was about 6 or 7 o'clock at night, and it was starting to get dark out just a little bit. We would usually play until it got dark, because that was the time when most of our parents wanted us to come home. It was me and my friends Jordan, Brian, and Owen this time, and we played until sunset. It became dark, and we decided that the next score would win the game. By that time, the park had been completely empty for a little while, and on the side near a pond and a road, we saw a really tall guy dressed as a clown slowly emerge holding a balloon. It wasn't near Halloween time, and this guy looked to be well over 6 feet tall. As soon as we noticed him, we all got the creeps. We stopped and watched what he would do. He slowly walked into the park and then gave us a slow and creepy wave. Then he started slowly walking towards us. Me and my friends had seen enough, and we all started walking to leave. We left the park and then all went our separate ways, with the clown still walking behind us at a far distance. When we split up, I noticed that I was the one that the clown seemingly decided to follow. He was really far back, but I could see him slowly walking behind me down the street, holding his balloon. I walked for a while. Then I couldn't take it anymore, and I sprinted the rest of the way home without looking back. I was sure that I had lost him, and I didn't see or hear him when I got home, and I went inside. I figured it was just a guy trying to scare kids for no reason, and I felt very safe at home. When I got into my bedroom to go to bed that night, I noticed immediately that my bedroom window was open a crack. Right away, I feared the worst, that the clown had gotten into my room or something. I was too embarrassed to ask my parents to search my room for a creepy clown for me, so I looked myself. To my relief, my bedroom was completely empty, and I felt better. I realized I was probably paranoid, and my mom or dad had opened my window. I went to bed feeling good, but awoke in the night to the sound of my window sliding upwards. I looked over and saw a man wearing a ski mask entering the room about halfway in. I screamed as loud as I possibly could, and he quickly went back out the window and ran away. My mom came running into my room, and I told her what happened. My dad ran outside, but the man was long gone by that time. We called the police, and they came and talked to me, and I realized that the man was likely the same one who had dressed as a clown. He must have slid my window open slightly, then came back at night. The scary part is I don't believe the man was ever found.
This happened years ago, and I still think about it. During this time, I lived alone in a smaller house. I always considered my neighborhood and city to be safe. I knew a lot of my neighbors, and it was a quiet neighborhood where not that much happened. That's why this story was even more disturbing. One night, I was fast asleep. I had gone to bed at about 10 o'clock when I usually did. At 2 o'clock in the morning, though, I suddenly woke up. Before I could figure out what was going on, I realized that my doorbell was ringing. Now, at 2 o'clock in the morning, the sound of anything can be startling and creepy. I sat up and tried to think of anybody who would ring my doorbell at 2 a.m. They rang it again, and I got out of my bed and left my bedroom. I walked down the hallway into my living room and then looked out of the front window. There was a man dressed as a clown standing on my front step. His face was painted, and it was painted really well. He was wearing a clown costume also, and it wasn't some cheap one that you could get for $20. This man really went all out. I moved back away from the window so that he wouldn't notice me. Then he knocked on the front door. What did this guy want? I moved over to the end of my living room window, which was mostly covered. I was careful to be in a spot where he wouldn't be able to see me. Then I watched him. He kept standing there, just staring ahead at my front door. I watched him the entire time. Then he moved and left my front step. At first, I thought that he was finally leaving, but instead, after walking off my front step, he turned and headed down towards the side of my house. He went out of my sight and was going near my bedroom. I left where I was at the window and walked to the hallway again. Then I went inside of my bedroom.
As soon as I got in, I saw the clown looking directly into my bedroom window. I jumped back and left the room in a hurry. I was really creeped out to see that he somehow seemed to know where my bedroom was. I wasn't really sure what to do. About a minute later, I decided to go back in my bedroom and check and see if he was still at the window. I carefully opened up the door and looked. He was gone. I felt better and hoped that this time he was finally gone for good. As I was standing there in my bedroom, though, suddenly there was a loud banging sound from my back door. It had to be the clown. He was pounding on the door about as loud as he could. At that point, I called the police. I reported a man dressed as a clown in my backyard banging on my back door. The clown stopped pounding at my door, and I didn't look to check and see if he was gone. I went back into the living room and waited for the police to arrive. Several minutes later, I decided to look out of the windows again. I went to the back window and looked. When I did, I actually saw the clown. He was at the corner of my yard and moved out of it into my neighbor's yard. I kept watching and he went out of sight. Several minutes later, the police got there. I told them what happened and gave them a description of the guy. It would be hard to miss him. The police searched my yard, which wasn't very big, but the guy was gone. They didn't see him in any immediate neighbors' properties, so they didn't go in anybody else's yard. I was told they would drive around the area and look for the guy. In the meantime, if I saw him again, I was told to call back. The police left after that. I stayed up for a while, checking windows, but the clown did not return. And after that night, he didn't come back at all. It was so random. I still wonder who he was and what he wanted. What would have possibly happened if I had answered the door? I'm really glad that I didn't. Maybe it was just some guy trying to be a prankster. I don't know. But it was still one of the creepiest things that I've ever seen.
My wife and I live somewhat out in the country. It's not super out there, but we have a decent-sized yard with the woods on our property, and we don't have too many houses on our street. One night, my wife had gone to bed already, and I was staying up late watching a sports game on TV in the living room. When the game was over, I turned off the TV and then turned off the lights in the living room. As the lights went out, that gave me a clear image of our front yard, and something caught my eye as it did. I noticed there was someone dressed as a clown, complete with a mask and everything, just standing in the front yard staring directly at me. It was extremely unusual in my neighborhood to see anybody walking down the street, and we had a fairly long driveway, so I was shocked at the sight of a clown in the front yard. He didn't take his eyes off me, and I walked over to the front door. The closer I got, the creepier the clown looked, and I opened the front door just slightly and stuck my head out. He was pretty far away, but I wasn't going to take any chances. I had planned to yell at the clown and ask him who he was and what he wanted, but shortly after I opened the front door, I saw the clown run away and disappear off into the woods. Now this was also concerning, as those were our woods, but I hoped he would just run off and that would be that. I stayed up a little while longer, even went all around the house making sure every window and door was locked before finally deciding I would head to bed. I fell asleep rather quickly, but was woken up sometime in the night by my wife. She said to me, "Do you hear that?" I listened closely, but heard nothing. She then told me that she woke up to what sounded like someone knocking on the front door. Just then, there was more knocking. It was like a really fast and constant knock. Not a very hard knock, but just very constant and rather fast. This time, the knock continued for a good 15 seconds straight before stopping. I figured it had to be the clown. I told my wife about seeing the clown in the yard, and she suggested calling the police. I slowly got out of bed as the knocking started up again. This time the knocking did not stop and just continued at the same fast pace that it had been at before. It was seeming like it was slowly getting louder and louder. I slowly walked towards the living room and tried my best to remain out of sight the entire time of the clown. Once I got there, I could barely see that it was in fact the clown that had returned to the window of the front door. As he continued to knock, I started to hear laughing from the clown, a really creepy laugh. At that point, I yelled in a loud and firm voice that I had already called the police and they were on their way. Of course, I hadn't actually called the police yet,
but I wanted to see if I could scare him off. It seemed to work, because I didn't hear any more knocking after that, and he seemed to walk away. I don't know why that clown went to our house, or how he even found us.
This is something that happened a couple of years ago, but I still think about it sometimes. One day, several of my friends and I were getting together. It was a group of 7 of us women in total, and we went to a restaurant in town for brunch. We live in a village that has a very nice downtown area where you can walk all around. It has parks and several roads, but it doesn't get that bad of traffic. There are lots of nice shops, restaurants, and bars, and it has a very relaxing feel to it. My friends and I go there all the time. On this day, we all went to the restaurant. I remember that it was really busy as lots of other people go there. My friends and I were there for a while, and we were sitting at this large table that was in the patio area outside in the corner. I brought my instant camera to take a group picture of us, and I did. We were at the restaurant for over an hour, and then we all left together. We walked as a group through town and went to this bar on the other side just for a drink. We hung out there for a while and talked some more, and after that we left. After walking back through the town, we went our separate ways and went back home. Now, it wasn't until the next day that I realized I did not have my camera. I concluded that I must have left it at the restaurant and forgot it there, because I did not know where else it would be. I remember that I called the restaurant and asked if anybody had found it. The camera had a small case that it was in, and I did not have that either. However, when I called, I was told they did not have it. So either I thought nobody had found it or somebody had took it. I was trying to retrace my steps and think about where it could be, but I was sure that I didn't have it after the restaurant. I called the bar that we were at too, just to be safe, and they didn't have it either. I was disappointed, but I guess it wasn't a huge deal. I could always get another camera. However, only about an hour later, I got a call back from the first restaurant. They said that they did have the camera after all, and that it had been recently turned in. So I left and went down there and picked it up. After I got my camera back, it was in its case, and when I got back home, I looked inside. When I did, something was strange. The camera was in there, but so were a bunch of loose photos. I looked at them, and there were all these pictures of a creepy-looking clown. They were taken at night in what looked like a dark room. This person had their face fully painted as a clown and were wearing a wig. The photos were quite scary-looking to me if I'm being honest, and there were like 10 of them, all pretty similar. Then there were a few other photos. There was a couple taken outside during the daytime on the street of what looked like the downtown area of the village, and then I realized that they were taken of me and my friends as we were walking down the sidewalk. We were off in the distance, not super close, but visible, and whoever took the photo was walking a long ways back. And then the last photo in the pile of them was the one that I took with my friends. I was really creeped out after seeing this. I called back the restaurant and asked them where they found the camera if they knew. I was told that a man had brought it up to the counter and said that he found it. I'm guessing that was the guy who the clown was who took the photos. This may have been his idea of a funny prank, but I found it really creepy, especially the fact that he found my camera and didn't give it back to me at first. Instead, he followed us, took our pictures, and then took a bunch of creepy clown pictures. Then he gave it back. I obviously haven't seen any creepy clowns since then, but I still remember that sometimes.
This happened many years ago. I was younger and in college, and during the summers I would work at a sports stadium in the city where they had games to earn extra money. This meant I would drive back home really late at night and oftentimes get back to my parents' house after midnight. I lived about 40 minutes away from where I worked, but when it was really late I could make it home in under 30 because how there was usually no traffic. I was driving home one night after a late game. I made it about halfway home to where it changed from being city to much more of a country and rural area. I was the only car driving down the road with woods on both sides. As I was driving, I thought I noticed something on the road up ahead and I slowed down. It looked like a person, but as I got closer, I could see that it was someone dressed as a full clown. They had a clown mask and a whole clown outfit, and they were even holding several balloons in their hands. I had to nearly come to a complete stop. The clown stood facing the woods, but was standing on the road in the driving lane that I was in. As I got closer, he slowly turned to face me. I was really creeped out by this. I was going maybe 5 miles per hour, and went into the opposite traffic lane to pass the clown. As I did, he started to walk towards me. He was walking really slow, so I sped up my car and drove off. The farther I drove away, the more I realized just how creepy it was. The clown was standing in the road, with woods on both sides, and I didn't see a car or anything parked, so I have no idea how he got there. There wasn't really any houses in the area or businesses either. I was just happy to be away from him. Shortly after that, though, I heard the noise my car would make when I needed to get more gas, and I looked to see that the tank was almost empty. I pulled into the next gas station that I saw, which was a quiet little one with only 2 pumps, and nobody else was there. I paid, and then filled up my car with fuel. As I got done, and was about to get back into my car, I heard a noise coming from the distance. The woods on the edge of the gas station's property ran along the side of the road, and I saw the clown peek its head out from behind a tree. It was really dark out, so it took me a minute to realize what it was at first, but when I did, I was terrified. After the clown and I seemingly made eye contact, he emerged from the woods and began running at a full sprint straight for me. I quickly got inside my car and started it, then drove away from there as fast as I could. I drove home, and thankfully my parents were still awake because they helped me calm down. That way I could finally get to bed. I never saw that clown again. I don't know who it was or how he got to the gas station so fast. It was very strange for someone to be dressed as a clown, wandering around the woods with no houses nearby at that time of night.
I'm a 28-year-old male, and there's this girl that I work with who's 30 years old, and I've gone out with a few times. Well, after this one particular night, she invited me over to her house after a fundraiser we went to together to have a drink. I of course accepted. We sat in her living room and talked over a beer. It was a nice conversation, nothing weird at all, and no red flags that I saw. We mainly talked about people we hated from work and what had happened in the night previously. She asked if I wanted to go upstairs with her, and I agreed. She told me to go have a seat on the bed while she got ready in the bathroom. I honestly hadn't processed this information when I was going over to her bed. The only light on in the room was one from her bedside lamp. As I was scanning the room waiting for her to come out of the bathroom, I couldn't believe what I saw. There was not a single room decoration that wasn't clown-themed. I'm not talking goofy-looking clowns. All the decorations were the scary type of clown stuff. The ones that I took note of were a clown portrait on the wall near the bed, wearing a suit with a menacing grin, a picture of a clown playing golf, 2 statues on each bed that had clowns looking directly at the bed, and there were also several hand-drawn pictures of clowns, some on the walls, some in frames, and one that was probably the most disturbing to me was a very demonic-looking clown portrait that faced the bed. Since childhood, I've had an intense fear of clowns. I couldn't see how anybody could feel comfortable sleeping in a room like this, or even live in a home where a room like this existed. This absolutely destroyed my anxiety. I even started wondering if I was in danger maybe. I had notions in my head where I half expected her to come out of the bathroom wearing clown makeup, and that she would try to kill me. I had started mentally preparing for that and a possible escape if that were the case. Thankfully, that didn't happen, and she didn't want to kill me. Not the scariest of encounters, but it was a very creepy and unsettling event. My whole drive home, I couldn't even listen to music because of how weird I felt after seeing a bedroom that looked like that. I get people have strange hobbies, but that was just creepy to me personally. I'm still good friends with her, but I will never go back into that bedroom.
This occurred several months ago. It was a cool spring night, and I was fast asleep in my house. I'm a female and live with my husband. However, he was out of town for the weekend on business. I was suddenly woken up in the middle of the night, a little past 1 a.m. I had no idea what woke me, but I was suddenly wide awake. I sat up in bed and looked around the room. It was mostly dark as all the lights were off. Then my eyes wandered to the bedroom window. That's where I saw a clown face looking right at me. Not a guy with a clown mask, but a guy who had literally painted his face to look like a clown. And he did a pretty good job too. I immediately screamed. When I saw him, he quickly disappeared and ran away. He was now out of my sight, but I was terrified. I grabbed my phone and called my husband. Luckily, he answered. He told me to call the police. As I was still on the phone with him, I got up and walked over to the window and looked outside. The clown guy was gone by now, and I couldn't see him at all through the window, but as I was still looking around our front yard out the window, I heard the sound of glass breaking at the opposite end of the house. I got a terrible feeling. After hearing this, I ended my call with my husband to call the police. Then I ran as fast as I could to my bedroom door and closed it and locked it. I then started to hear movement inside the house on the other end. This was followed by the sound of a man laughing hysterically. It was one of the creepiest moments ever. I was on the phone with the police telling them to please hurry. They said they would be there as fast as they could, and I stayed on the line with them. I heard the clown walking through the house and slowly getting closer. As he did, his creepy laugh continued. I was dreading the moment he would reach my bedroom door, and eventually he got to the hallway. I think he went to the other bedroom first, but then, about a minute later, I heard the footsteps reach the end of the hallway and go right outside the bedroom I was in. It was silent, and then I heard his creepy laugh right outside the door. I moved quietly as far away from the door as I could possibly get. Then, I saw the knob turn, and thankfully stop. The door was locked, and I then heard 3 calm knocks, followed by a quieter laugh. Then, things got quiet for a few seconds. I was holding my breath, and then he started banging on the door, seemingly as hard as he could. This guy had to be insane or something. I was told the police were within a minute away, and I was just hoping they would get there faster. The guy was banging on the door, and I didn't think it would last too long. Then, out of the window, I thought I finally saw the police lights. Sure enough, it was them, and the sound of a siren soon got louder and louder. The banging on the door stopped, and things got quiet again. The police were at the house a very short time later, and they were able to get inside, and I finally left the room. However, the clown man was gone. He had left out the back door and left it wide open. The police searched the area, but couldn't find him. The only thing found was his red rubber nose in our backyard. My husband got home the next day, thankfully, and the next time he went out of town, I went with him. It's been a few months, but I still get scared that the clown might come back sometime.
I used to work at Walmart as a cashier. Sometimes I would see some weird things working there, especially late at night. But the one that takes the cake is something that happened one particular night when I was fairly new to the job. So this was way back in the fall of 2004. I had just recently got my job at Walmart and was working as a cashier. I had only been there for maybe a month. I was only 17 and this was my first job ever. During this time, I did not have a car and would rely on my parents to drive me to and from work. So one time, I was working sometime in the afternoon until like 10 o'clock at night. Maybe 11 o'clock, I don't remember the exact time, but I do remember that it was pretty late. The shift was pretty average from the start. I don't remember a whole lot about early in it, but I do know that when it got to be nighttime, things were pretty quiet as usual. There were not many people there, and I would only have somebody come into my checkout line every here and there. Eventually, when I was off in maybe an hour, things were even more quiet. Then I saw someone approach my checkout. It was a man who looked like a clown. He was wearing pretty much normal clothes from what I remember, but then he had his face painted all white, and his hair was either painted red or it was a wig. His nose was red, and all around his lips was also red as well, and then he had painted on his eyebrows. It was the full clown look, and it was so much so that I had absolutely no idea what the guy really looked like. It was a strange thing to see, and I didn't know why he was looking like a clown. It was not Halloween, and I didn't know of any events going on nearby or anything like that. When I saw him, I don't remember what he was buying, but I think he was just getting like 1 or 2 things. I said hi, and then I asked him what he was doing looking like a clown. I was curious, and I remember that I asked it in a cheerful and friendly way. However, the clown looked at me with a very serious face, almost a glare, and did not answer. I thought maybe he lost a bet or something, and I asked him if he lost a bet. He still said nothing and just looked at me angrily. I said sorry and nothing else. The only other time either of us said anything was when I told him the price, and then he paid. He seemed very serious and borderline angry, and it made me nervous. So he took his stuff and then walked away and left the store. I continued on with work after that. For the next bit of time, mostly there really wasn't anything to do. Eventually, I got another customer in my checkout line and scanned their items for them. However, later on, when I was off in maybe 10 minutes, I remember that I saw a coworker walking by. It was someone who I was friendly with. He told me that there was a man dressed as a clown just walking around the parking lot. I said that guy had been in my checkout line. My coworker said that it was really weird, and then he walked away. Then, a few minutes later, I was finally off of work. I went over and clocked out, and then I went out to wait for my mom to pick me up.
Normally, I would sit out on the bench that was on the sidewalk directly in front of the Walmart building. When I got outside and sat down, things were obviously very quiet, as you could imagine. There were far less cars now in the parking lot, so I could see a large amount of it. Only about a minute or so into waiting, I saw the clown guy again. He was walking at the far side of the parking lot towards the back. He walked over a ways, and then he turned and started going up another road towards the store. I did not know what he was doing. The way it looked was that he was just walking around, not really doing anything. I remember that he was walking very slowly too. It was really weird. He walked up that row and then crossed over into the row that was closer to me. I'm not going to lie, I was just watching him the whole time because it was so strange. When he started walking down the row closer to me now, he looked over and noticed me watching him. Then he stopped and just stared at me, once again with a very serious look. I looked away, but when I looked again like 10 seconds later, he was still there, staring at me. He hadn't moved at all. Now, he was still a good 100 feet away from me or so, but it was still unsettling. After staring at each other for a while longer, I waved, not knowing what else to do, to try to be friendly. He did not wave back. He just stood there and kept staring at me. Then I saw him shake his head almost in disgust, and then turn and walk back to another row of cars sort of away from me. He continued with his walk through the parking lot. I really didn't think that this guy was simply joking around and trying to be funny. It seemed like he was really serious. He then walked back over to the other row of cars to where he had been before that was closer to me. When he did, he once again caught me watching him and stopped and started glaring at me. He wasn't moving like before, but this time I had had enough. I got up and just walked back over to the doors and went inside the store. I waited for my mom in there for the rest of the time until she came to pick me up. Finally, a few minutes later, she was there. I quickly got inside the car and we left. When we did, I looked around for the creepy clown guy and I saw him. He was still there, standing in the parking lot and staring at me again. My mom saw him too, and I was glad that we were leaving. After that, I never saw him again. I still don't know who he was or what he was doing. I'm not sure if anyone from Walmart ever told him to leave or not. Back then, our store was open 24 hours, so he could have theoretically gone back in at any point. It was just really weird how he was so serious, yet painted as a clown. I'm just glad that I didn't see him anymore. This happened 2 years ago on the 4th of July. I have a sister who's older than I am, and she's married with a son who is my nephew. He was 4 years old at the time of this story, and I always like to spend time with him, and he calls me his favorite aunt. I'm also his only aunt, but that's beside the point. So he wanted me to take him to the 4th of July parade in our local city that we live in. It's always a big deal, and it goes down Main Street and a couple of other roads. My sister and her husband live within a walking distance of the parade route, and it took place on the morning of the 4th. So I arrived at my sister's house, and her husband's parents were there visiting. Going to the parade was just me and my nephew, so we left and walked to the parade route. We found a place to sit down along the side of the road on the edge of the neighborhood. The parade started shortly after, and it was a pretty good turnout. My nephew enjoyed it, but at the end, something strange happened. Most of the people in the parade were the typical things that you would see. Towards the end, I remember seeing this clown walking around by himself. It seemed normal at first, but then it kinda didn't. He was just walking around, looking at people, and he seemed a little bit out of place. He was not a 4th of July themed clown either, just a regular clown. When he got close to us, he walked over real slow. Then he walked directly up to me and my nephew. He gave my nephew a high five, and then he went up to me and gave me a hug. It was awkward, and I'm not sure why he did, but I still figured that he was just being a friendly parade clown at that point. He kind of walked off then. After that, I remember about 5 minutes later noticing him again. He was walking back the opposite way of the parade traffic. He appeared to just kind of be wandering around. Soon after, the parade ended. I didn't notice the clown, and the people started leaving. As my nephew and I were now getting ready to leave, though, I noticed the clown once more. He was walking back from far away and heading in our direction. I wasn't sure exactly what he was doing. Nobody was talking to him or anything, but a few people were looking at him. We left the area and started walking back on the sidewalk to my sister's house. The pace that my nephew and I were walking was pretty slow because he's only 4 and he didn't want me to carry him, so I was just going at his pace. When we made it about to the next street over, I noticed the clown again. And now it was just us and the clown. Nobody else was on this street. He was at the far opposite end of it, just slowly walking around. We did not have to go down this street, but we just had to cross it and walk past down the sidewalk basically.
It was weird that we saw the clown, so we kept going, and I was hoping that he would not follow us or anything. By the time we made it past the street to another one, the clown was still walking towards us, and closer. I was starting to get a little concerned because it seemed weird. The way the clown was walking was like he was just wandering around. We continued down the sidewalk, and the clown ended up following us. We finally made it back to my sister's street, and now the clown was walking behind us only about 50 feet back. None of us said anything. I hurried up, and at this point picked up my nephew and carried him into the yard, and then we went inside. I looked back, and the clown was still walking towards us, but he was in the middle of the street. I felt much better after getting inside though. After my nephew rejoined his parents and grandparents, I was curious, and I went to a front window. I looked out, and I saw that the clown was still there in the middle of the street. He was just standing there and looking in the direction of the house. It was so strange that I decided to go tell my sister and her husband about it. Her husband was out on the back patio grilling. When he got wind of it, he decided to go see for himself. Now, this was really weird. My sister's husband is a fairly big guy. He's over 6 feet tall and about 200 pounds. He's not a mean guy, but could look intimidating to some people. He walked out into the front yard, and the clown did not move. He asked the clown guy what he was doing, and the clown just waved at him, but did not move still. So my sister's husband walked to the end of the yard, now like 15 feet from the clown, and the clown guy still didn't move. My sister's husband was telling him to leave, and he was just ignoring him. I couldn't believe that the clown was staying there. Then my sister's husband got like right in his face. He still didn't move. My sister's husband put his hand around the clown's shoulder and started kind of leading him away. They walked like 5 feet, and then the clown randomly took off running, sprinting to the end of the street and out of sight. My sister's husband came back shaking his head and said that he thought the guy was crazy or something was wrong with him. We all went back inside, and thankfully that was the last we saw of that creepy clown. For a year, a long time ago, I worked at a convenience store. It was off this road with a lot of other businesses on it. My store was like the ones connected to gas stations, except we didn't have any gas. It was just a small store with lots of drinks, snacks, and a little bit of other stuff. So basically, I would work by myself during the night at the counter. We closed at 3 a.m. every night, so it would be pretty late nights for me. Usually, not that many people would come through for my shift though, so I preferred it to working a normal shift, because though the hours might have been odd, it was significantly less work. From the time that I started, there would usually be a decent amount of customers, but then as the shift went on, it would get quieter and quieter. After midnight, we would hardly get anyone. So one night, at around midnight, I remember that nobody had been in the store for a while until this one guy walked in. When I saw him entering, the first thing that I noticed was that he was wearing a clown mask. It was kind of creepy to see at midnight, but I also just figured that it was some guy trying to be funny. It was not Halloween time, so I wasn't very amused. Of course, working by myself behind the counter, when somebody enters wearing any kind of a mask, it raises suspicions. I thought that it could potentially be a robbery. The man walked in though, got within maybe 20 feet of me, and then turned and started looking at me. As he did, he was just standing there. I said to the guy, "Very funny, pal." He didn't respond and just kept standing there and staring at me. I said, "What do you want, a prize? Best costume of the day, there you go." The man still ignored me. After like another minute of us just staring at each other, the guy finally started walking away. He moved towards the other side of the store very slowly, still looking at me. It was very strange. At last, the man walked to the doors and finally left. I was glad to see him go. For the remainder of my shift, which was about 2 or 3 hours, I didn't see the guy. There was maybe 2 or 3 total people for the rest of the time that night. I remember when I was finally off at 3 a.m., I locked up the shop and went to leave. When I was walking out, I saw the clown man a ways away. He was across the street by the corner now, walking down the sidewalk by himself. He was the only person out that I could see at that time. I thought it was weird that I was seeing him again. As I walked away to go to my car behind the shop, I remember noticing him start to look over at me. I quickly walked away though and got to my car and went home. The next night, I worked again. It was the same exact hours as I usually did, so I would be getting off at 3 a.m. Nothing really strange happened during my shift that night. There was a guy who came into the shop and looked around for kind of a long time and then left without buying anything. But other than that, things were pretty quiet. Well, that night, after I got off of work at 3 a.m., I closed up the shop, left, and went to my car again. When I got there, something really weird happened.
When I opened my door, on the driver's seat there was a clown mask, the same one that the guy had been wearing. I was so surprised to see it that I jumped back and I thought that the guy might be in my car. I looked inside though and he wasn't there. I took the mask and tossed it and then I went home. The next day I was paranoid. Everyone that came in the shop, I wondered if it was the clown guy. I didn't see him again though, and I really have no idea how he got inside my car. I thought that I locked it. I guess it's possible that I didn't, or maybe he picked the lock or something. My car was kinda old, but I really don't know for sure, and it's all very strange.
At one point, I worked at a mall as a maintenance worker. This is the craziest thing that ever happened in that time. The mall that I worked at was pretty large and had lots of walkways. Tons of people would also go there every day. So most of the time, I was kept pretty busy. I would do all sorts of stuff and really whatever was needed. So one night, I found myself working near one end of the mall. It had gotten to be pretty quiet now because the mall was only open for another 30 minutes or so. I was in a sort of open area near the escalators where you could see the other levels of the mall, and this mall had 3 levels. There were some water fountains and benches in the area that I was. I was mopping the floor in that particular section, and I didn't see any other customers at all in that time. So in the middle of mopping, all of a sudden, I saw a water bottle hit the ground right in front of me. I was very confused at first. I looked around and then realized that somebody must have dropped it from one of the levels above. When I looked, I didn't see anybody. That was strange. I picked up the empty water bottle and put it in the trash, then continued my work. However, just about a minute later, I heard something whizzing towards me from above, but before I could react, I heard whatever it was hit the ground right behind me. I looked over and saw an empty drink cup laying on the floor. I looked up again immediately, but saw no one. I realized though that somebody was intentionally tossing things down here towards me. They were probably even trying to hit me. Obviously, this was not cool. I shouted, asking who did that, but got no answer. I went over to the escalator then and went upstairs to the second level to see who it could be. I looked around but didn't see anyone, so then I went up to the third level, but when I got there, I didn't see anyone. Whoever had done it must have run away. I figured that it was some teenager messing around and thinking that it was funny. I just hoped that they wouldn't do it again. So then I went back down and continued my work. I mopped the floors unbothered for the next 2 or 3 minutes or so. Then, suddenly, I heard the sound of something headed towards me again. Once more, I had no time to react, because it all happened so quick. All of a sudden, I felt my back getting hit by something. This one was pretty hard. I looked and saw another water bottle on the ground. This one was almost completely full though, which is why it hurt. I was really angry now. I ran for the escalator and then ran up it. I went up to the 3rd floor and this time finally saw who was doing it. Standing right in the center of the walkway, about 50 feet away from me, was a man wearing a really creepy clown mask. He stood there just facing me, and nobody else was around at all. I yelled at him, asking him what on earth he was doing throwing things at me. He didn't say anything or even move. I started angrily walking towards him. I was just planning on giving him more of a piece of my mind. However, when I started to approach, he slowly lifted his hand towards me, revealing that he had brass knuckles. I realized that this guy did not seem like somebody who I wanted to mess with. In fact, he seemed like he could possibly be a bit of a loose cannon. So I just turned and walked away, going back down the escalator. Luckily, he did not follow me. I didn't return to mopping, but walked out of the man's sight from the 3rd level. Then I called mall security as well as the police. I notified them both of what was going on, and then stayed away from the area where the guy had tossed the stuff at me. Security arrived a short time later. Unfortunately, the man was gone. I'm not sure if he just went into a bathroom and took his mask off or if he left the mall entirely, but he was not located. After that, I thankfully did not have any more incidents like that in my time working there, but that was by far the craziest thing.
This happened back on Halloween night of 2016. I worked pretty late on Halloween, and I started driving back home at around 10 p.m. I lived by myself in a smaller house. I knew that I probably wouldn't be home for any trick-or-treaters with me having to work late, so I left a bowl of candy on my front step for them. Overall, I didn't really do anything for Halloween other than that. We had some decorations at work and stuff, but I was pretty busy with my job. So it took me about 15 minutes to drive home, and the roads were all pretty quiet by this time. I remember though, that when I was about a mile or so from my house, I saw this guy dressed as a clown standing on the side of the road. He was sort of off in the ditch, and this was just a sort of quiet road with woods on both sides, so it was weird that he would be standing there. As I drove by, the clown man waved at me. I knew that it was somebody dressed up for Halloween, probably trying to scare people. I waved back and continued my drive home. Just a couple of minutes later, I arrived to my neighborhood. My street was pretty typical, with many houses on it, and at this hour all the trick-or-treaters were done, so it was now very quiet. However, as I approached my driveway, I noticed something. There was another guy fully dressed as a clown, wearing a mask and everything. He was standing right in the middle of my driveway in front of the garage and holding a balloon. Even with it being Halloween, I was still creeped out at the sight. I started to pull into my driveway, but I stopped at the back end of it. The clown looked directly at me, but did not wave or anything. I thought that maybe he would walk away or something, but he stayed put. So I rolled down my window a little and I called out to him. I said, "Hey, what are you doing?" He didn't acknowledge me at all, and he just kept standing there holding his balloon. I told him that I had to get my car into the garage, and he was in my way. He still didn't move though. So at that point, I wasn't really sure what to do. After like a full minute of me sitting there with the car running, I decided to just get out and go inside. I figured that the clown would move eventually. I parked my car at the very back end of the driveway, still a good 30 feet or so from the clown. Then I turned my engine off and got out. The clown was still standing there, continuing to look at me. Right when I started to take a few steps into my yard, the clown began to walk towards me, and he was walking at an angle where he would reach me before I got to my front door, so I stopped. And when I stopped, he did as well. I didn't know if it was a good idea to go for my front door anymore, because I would have to unlock it, and if he was going to chase after me, he would be able to catch up with me. Then, all of a sudden, I saw 3 more clowns come running out from behind my house. They were literally sprinting and heading in my direction. I didn't waste any time, and I instantly ran back for my car. I quickly got inside of it, locked the doors, and then scrambled to start my engine as quickly as I could. The 3 clowns, as well as the original one, ran right up to my car. One tried opening my driver's door, and the other my passenger's one. Within seconds, I was able to back out of the driveway, leaving them standing there. They didn't follow me into the street, but just kept standing at the end of my driveway. As I drove away, they all at once started waving at me. It was the creepiest thing I've ever seen. I drove out of my neighborhood and just went around random streets for like 5 to 10 minutes. Then I went back home, hoping that the clown men would be gone. If they were still there, I was going to call the cops. But thankfully, when I arrived back, they were all gone. I got out of my car and I looked through my backyard as well as front, and nobody was there. But when I got to my front door, I saw that the balloon that the one clown had been holding was now tied to my door handle. It was one last thing to really creep me out. I went inside and was a little worried that the clowns might return, but they didn't. That was my scariest experience that I've had during Halloween.
This happened when I was maybe 9 or 10 years old. I was invited to a friend's birthday party, and there was about 10 other kids there. It was a friend named Tony, and he was not my best friend, but I knew him pretty well. I also knew just about everybody else at his birthday party. The party itself was at Tony's house, which was maybe 5 minutes away from mine. It was a really populated neighborhood with lots of houses. I remember that the party was both inside and outside, because this was during the summer. I didn't know much about what was planned for the party, but when I got there, I was pleasantly surprised. Tony's parents had done a good job of setting everything up. I remember they had video games inside of the house and lots of snacks inside as well. Then, in the backyard and front yard, they had activities like bags and mini golf and some other stuff. So after getting there, we played some games and eventually had pizza and cake. Then, when it got a little bit later, everyone kind of spread out. Some people were playing video games inside, and others went out to the yard. I remember that Tony was inside, but I went out into the front yard with 2 or 3 other kids.
We were hanging out there and it was beginning to get dark. I don't remember exactly what we were doing, but I remember that I was looking out into the street and I noticed this clown. Well, it was a man dressed up as a clown. I'm not sure where he had come from, but he was walking down the side of the street out front. We soon noticed that he was walking in our direction. We figured that Tony's parents must have hired the clown. It was probably a funny joke, because Tony's parents were funny people. So this clown guy walked right up to the front yard. He then approached me and the other kids that were there. Then he waved at us without saying anything. We didn't really know what to do. The clown guy started making hand signals and stuff, and then he walked up and grabbed one of my friend's arms. He started to walk away with him before my friend pulled himself away. The clown then turned around and took a few steps towards us. We all began to move back and away from him. That's when the clown started to run in our direction. I remember that we all just took off running and went back inside the house. We still thought it was probably a joke, but it seemed kind of strange. The clown did not follow us inside. But after getting in the house, we told Tony, who told his parents. Tony's parents said that they did not hire a clown. They were not expecting anybody in a clown costume. We got the creeps when we heard that. So some random guy dressed as a clown had just approached us and acted all weird. We all went outside to look, but did not see him. Tony's parents then called the police. They made everybody stay inside for the rest of the night. We all went to the windows and looked out of them. I remember like a couple minutes later, we saw the clown jogging down the street. When he passed by the house, he turned and did a little wave towards us. Then he was quickly out of sight. The police got there maybe 5 to 10 minutes later. The clown was no longer in the area though. Not long after, everyone's parents came and picked them up, so I left. We never found out who the clown guy was or what he was doing. I work at this small perfume store in a large mall. This mall has literally hundreds of stores inside of it. The store that I work at is one of the smaller ones, and it only requires one employee at a time. We sell all kinds of perfumes as well as a few skin products. Our store is open until the time the mall closes, which is 8 p.m. So one time I was working at the store until 8, and I would be by myself for the shift. Normally, the store is pretty quiet. Sometimes if the mall is really busy, we'll get a lot of customers, but usually there are not that many people in the store at once. I was sitting behind the counter, which faced directly to the entrance and a large window on either side of the entrance doors. The day went by as usual for the most part. We got some customers here and there, but it was mostly quiet. At probably like 5 or 6 o'clock though, something strange happened. I remember that nobody was in the store at that particular time, and I was just sitting behind the counter. Then I noticed this man walking past the store, and he was wearing this creepy looking mask. It was not quite a clown mask, but it looked sort of similar. He turned and then looked into the window at me and pressed his face up against the glass. It was quite creepy, but I figured it to be a joke and I laughed it off. He stayed at the window for an uncomfortable amount of time, probably over a minute. Then he finally stopped and walked a distance away. Before he passed by the store completely though, he stopped again and then looked in once more. He stared for a little while before finally turning and walking away. It was very weird. Over the next hour or so, I got a few more customers and we made a few sales. People would walk past the shop down the mall hallway all the time, but the later it got, the quieter it became. Then, at about 7 o'clock, I saw the man again. He walked past the shop once more and did not stop, but turned and looked at me as he passed by. It was very interesting, and I didn't really know what this guy was doing walking around the mall like that. I figured that he was probably messing with a lot of people and trying to get a reaction out of them. I didn't see the man for the rest of the time that we were open though. Then, at 8 o'clock, I went over to the entrance and I closed our 2 glass doors and then locked them. After that, I just had to finish up by doing a few things, and then I could leave for the night. I went back to the counter and would be able to leave in probably 5 minutes. As I was behind the counter though, I saw that the man was back. The same guy, still wearing his creepy mask. He stopped right in front of the 2 doors and started to stare at me. Then he came to the doors and tried opening them, but they were locked. After that, he started to walk away. I figured that he was leaving the mall. After all, it was now closed, and no stores inside would be open anymore. The man did not go out of my sight though. Instead, when he reached the end of the store, he turned around and walked back. Then he kind of started pacing back and forth in front of the shop and looking in at me almost the entire time. I tried my best to ignore him. Soon though, I was done with work and I wanted to leave, but I really didn't want to leave with this guy out front. I was hoping that he would just go away, but he didn't. After several more minutes with him still there, I was starting to get impatient. I hoped that one of the mall security guards would see him and tell him that he had to go. By now, he was probably one of the last people left in the mall, if not the last. He continued to stand around and look at me every so often. Sometimes he would pace around a little, but he would never move out of my sight. It was like he was just waiting for me to leave because he knew that I was off now, but I wasn't going to. I didn't know who this guy was or what he was capable of doing. Before, I figured him to be harmless, but now I wasn't so sure. This went on for several more minutes. Then, finally, I saw one of the mall security guards come into my view in front of the store. He started speaking to the man. I couldn't really hear what was being said exactly. I could just really hear their voices. Not long at all after they started speaking, the masked man started walking away and went out of sight. The security guard followed. There was not too much of an interaction, and most likely the guard was just telling him that the mall was closed and he had to go now. Still, I waited a couple of minutes and made sure that the guy didn't return. Then I was finally able to leave the store. I walked the now empty hallways of the mall and then out to my car in the parking lot. When I got outside and into the parking lot, I remember looking to my left. One of the first things that I noticed was the masked man. He was just sort of standing around like 100 feet away. He was sort of near another set of entrance doors and was standing on the sidewalk out front. I just hoped that he would not look over and see me. I walked as fast as I could to get to my car, and I was able to get there okay. Then I quickly left. When I did, I saw the guy still standing in the parking lot. I don't know if he was waiting for me to leave or what. Maybe he thought that I was going to exit out of the other doors. But either way, I was glad that I was just able to get out safely and make it back home. And after that, I never noticed the guy again. I still wonder sometimes what his plans were.
This is something that happened back when I was in high school. So one night, I was at home and in my bedroom. It was pretty late, and my parents and siblings had gone to bed already. My room was at one end of the front corner of the house and on the first floor. I often stayed up pretty late back then for some reason. But I remember that out of nowhere, I got this call on Snapchat. I didn't recognize who it was from. I don't even remember the username. It was something really hard to memorize. When I looked and didn't know who it was, I was very curious, so I actually decided to answer it. It was not a video call, but just a regular call. When I picked it up, at first I heard nothing. I asked who was there. Then I heard this whisper coming from the other end. I really couldn't make out what was being said though. I was trying to understand and turning the volume up on my phone. Then I made out a few words, but not much. I asked again who was calling, but the person hung up. Now, I guess I had some type of setting on my Snapchat where just anybody could call me or send me pictures, because shortly after this person hung up on me, I received a snap from them. I was very curious, so I opened it up. What I saw was somebody wearing a full clown mask taking a selfie. It was very strange to say the least. I sent them a message, again asking who this was, but unfortunately I did not get a response to this. Well, I thought that was that. I was a little freaked out by the whole thing, but the rest of the night nothing happened, and the next day things were fine. But that next night, I found myself alone in my bedroom late at night again. This time, I remember that I was sitting at my desk. In front of it is a window that sort of looks out to the front yard. You can also see part of the street. I remember noticing somebody walking down the street. It was very dark, so I couldn't see that well, and at this late night hour, it seemed odd that somebody would be out walking. But then the person came closer, and I realized that it was some guy wearing a clown mask.
the same type of one that the guy was wearing who had snapped me the night before. I thought this was very weird when I saw it, but this guy did not walk into our yard or anything. He just continued to walk down my street. I moved out of my bedroom and went into the living room to keep watching him. He continued to walk down the street until he was soon out of sight. Then, after that, I never saw him again. I blocked that account that had snapped me, and since then, nothing more happened. I'm still curious about it though. Was that clown the same person? It had to be. How did he know me though? That's what I'd like to find out. This happened when I was a kid. I believe I was about 12 years old. I was cleaning my room one night because my parents made me. It was pretty messy and getting kind of out of control. There was a lot of random clutter, such as clothes and books and some old school stuff. I cleaned the way that I always did, which was to just take everything and toss it under my bed and in my closet. It didn't take long and it got the job done. So as I was doing this one night, out of nowhere, I heard this scratching sound coming from my bedroom window. The window faced mostly our backyard, but sort of part of the neighbor's yard as well. When I looked over, I saw staring right at me through the window was a person wearing a clown mask. It was a really scary looking one too. I completely freaked out. I ran out of my bedroom and into the living room. That's where my parents were, and I told them that there was a clown at my window. They were obviously confused at first, but then they went into my room to investigate. But of course, when they got there, the clown man was gone. We looked out of the window, which could see much of the backyard, but not all of it. We didn't see him, but it was also nighttime and dark out. My parents decided to call the police, and I'm really glad that they did. We waited for them to arrive, and I was scared that the clown guy was going to come back. Thankfully, he didn't. We then spoke with officers when they got there. I showed them where I was and told them everything that had happened. They went outside and searched our entire property. Unfortunately, the clown man was gone. But they did, however, find his mask behind a bush. It was on the ground, and when they showed it to me, I was really freaked out. After that, the police left. I had a hard time getting to sleep that night, but eventually I did. I remember that I kept looking over to my window. Luckily, the clown did not return. In fact, I never saw him again after that. I still think about it all the time though. Who was in the clown mask, and why did they go to our house? There was 100 houses nearby. Was it random, or was I targeted? I still don't know. This happened when I was driving home from work late one night. I had just gotten off of work and was tired. It was probably almost midnight or something like that. I had made it most of the way back in my old beat-up car. It was a green 1997 Chevy Cavalier and barely running. As I made it about 75% of the way home, I was driving through a very quiet area. There were no other cars on the street, and mostly just woods on both sides. Suddenly, my car just started dying. I didn't know what to do and pulled over to the side of the road. I tried starting it again, but nothing happened at all. So my next choice was to take out my phone and call for my roadside assistance. Unfortunately, when I did this, my phone had no signal. It was very frustrating, and I wasn't really sure what to do. I sat there for a few minutes thinking of my options. I didn't know enough about cars to try to solve the problem myself, and I couldn't get a hold of anybody. It seemed like I may have to walk to try to find a gas station or something, but I really didn't know if there were any close by. As I was sitting in my car brainstorming a solution, I saw headlights appear on the road behind me. This was the first other car I had seen in a long time. I thought about getting out and flagging them down for a second, but I thought better of it. You don't know who could be driving on the street, especially this late at night, so I decided to stay put in my car. But when the vehicle approached, I saw it slowing down and then pull over behind me. I got nervous when I saw this. Sure, it could be a good citizen trying to help, but it could also be somebody that was up to no good. With it being so late and dark out, I couldn't help but feel a little bit scared. After the car stopped, about at least 50 feet behind me, The lights shut off. It appeared to be a smaller kind of pickup truck. I watched in my mirror, and then after a few seconds, the driver's door opened up. I saw a man step out, but immediately lean into his car and stick his head in there. It was like he was grabbing something. Then he emerged, and I saw that he had just put a clown mask on his head. That's what he was doing. It really gave me the creeps. I wasn't sure why he had done this, but I didn't think that it was to be funny. Then he started walking over to me. He was moving at a pretty quick pace too, and I had to make a decision fast. I don't remember what was going through my head. I just know that I opened up my driver's door and left the vehicle. Then I ran. I sprinted as fast as I could, past my car and along the side of the road. When I did, I didn't look back, but I did hear the clown start to run after me. This made me go faster. I kept running along the side of the road, but the road went on for a lot farther. I'm not sure why, but I suddenly took a right and then ran into the woods. I think I just wanted to get away from the clown, and I thought that it would be harder for him to see me. So I was sprinting through the woods for a while longer, and I did hear the clown enter. After a couple of minutes, I slowed down a little. It was at that point that I realized I couldn't hear him running behind me anymore. I continued to slow down and was just walking. Then I realized that he had likely stopped a while back. I took my phone out to see if I now had a signal, and luckily I did. I then dialed 911. I told them that I had been chased through the forest by a clown, and my car was broken down on the side of the road. I'm not sure what they thought when they heard that, but it was the truth. I gave them my location as best as I could. I waited in the middle of the woods for a while, hearing nothing at all. Then I decided to try to walk back to my car. I went through the woods back the way I had came. I walked for several minutes, trying to make my way back to the road. Then, when I was passing by this small clearing area, on the other side something caught my eye. The clown was there, just standing behind another tree. He was mostly obstructed by the tree, but I noticed the whiteness of his mask. It was too late for me to hide, and he then looked over at me. Then I saw him emerge from behind the tree and start to move in my direction. I started sprinting, trying to get back to the road. The clown started to chase after me. It was another chase, and I ran even faster this time. It took me probably a full minute before I reached the road. When I did, I took off running in the direction where my car was parked. I did look back this time and saw the clown emerge from the woods. Then I looked back and kept running. A few seconds later, I saw flashing lights up ahead. The police were here. I kept running until I saw my car and then slowed down to a jog. I felt much better and looked back, but the clown was now gone. He must have run back into the woods. I met with the police, and the clown guy's truck was still parked behind my car. The police said they would stay with me until my roadside service got there, and they were able to call for me because I still had no signal. The clown guy did not return. When my road service came and towed my car, I got a ride back home, and the clown's truck was still there when I left, but he was nowhere in sight. I'm not sure if he just kept hiding in the woods the whole time or what. The next time I drove by there, the truck was gone. I don't know what that clown was planning to do that night. I'm really glad that I ran from him though.
This story occurred when I was driving back home from work one night. It was snowing like crazy and had been for quite some time. I got off of work late, which was not good news for me, because when I got back to my car, I had to clear off all of the snow with a snow scraper, and there was probably like 3 or 4 inches on top of it already. Then I got inside my car and left, and quickly realized that the driving conditions were not safe at all. It was probably 10 p.m. at this point. I drove very slowly on the roads, and there seemed to be hardly anybody else out driving. It would normally take me about 15 minutes to get home. This time, though, I think it took almost 30. Basically, the entire way back, I really only noticed one car, and it was driving behind me. I don't even remember at what point it started to drive behind me, but I think it was pretty early on. Each time that I turned, I didn't expect the car to turn with me, but it did. By the time I was almost home, I assumed that it was one of my neighbors. The roads were so slippery that you had to take every turn very slow.
When I turned onto my street, the car behind me did as well at a very slow speed. I was pretty sure that it was a neighbor. There are a lot of other houses on my street, and I don't know everyone, so when I got to my driveway, I turned and pulled in. The car following me kept going down the street. I have a garage at my house, but it's detached. I drove up to it and then opened the garage, drove inside, and then closed the garage door. Then I turned my car off and got out. After that, I got my bags from the back seat. Then I left the garage to walk to the house, but as soon as I opened the garage door, I saw a car parked in my driveway. It must have been the same one that had seemingly been following me. I was really confused and didn't know what was going on. I made it between my garage and house and had to walk around to the front door. When I saw the car, I stopped for a second and thought about what to do. I couldn't tell who was driving the car because of it being dark out and the headlights, plus all the snow. I didn't know who it was or what they were doing here. Instead of confronting them or something, I decided not to. I chose to ignore them and walk right past. Looking back, it was kind of weird, but I just wanted to get inside. I figured they would probably drive away, plus it was snowing and it was safer inside. I turned and began walking along the front of my house to the door. When I was about halfway there, I heard the door to the car open. Whoever had been inside must have gotten out. I kept walking and didn't bother to turn around, and when I just about made it to my front door, finally decided to look over. When I did, I saw a man standing there next to the car, wearing a really creepy-looking clown mask. It sent a shiver down my spine. I hurried and unlocked the door and then got inside. He didn't move though. He just stood there. It was really creeping me out, and after getting inside, I went to the other end of the house. I wanted to just ignore it. When I went back a few minutes later, he was gone. The car and the guy in the clown mask. I was happy to see that, but the whole situation still seemed really odd to me. Why would somebody follow me in that bad of a snowstorm? The driving conditions were terrible. Then he just stood there, staring at me like a complete weirdo. It's something that still leaves me wondering today.